to find better lighting because I'm in my car. I don't want the light to go out again. Cause I haven't recorded anything in a while. Let me see something. Okay, let's see. I'll take this off. Put it on the
Man, I'm glad I noticed that before we got too far in it, man. This is like my first time going live on
Yeah,
uh on StreamYard.
yeah. I've never quite done it myself either. So let me.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm still trying to figure it out. I just happened to look in the upper right hand corner, like it says go live. I'm like, I guess I gotta hit that button. So now
Yeah,
we officially live. We didn't get too far in it, man. So we can always back up and move back up to the part that we were getting ready to discuss now, because I wanted everybody to hear your full story and everything like that. And we could both let the people know what our connections are in the Southeast, because I think people need to know that, man, because
yeah,
a lot of the stories are surrounding people who have deep roots in the South, like you and I do. Now I understand as well you got some in the West Indies as well, from Jamaica, I believe you said. And
yeah,
so I'm gonna let you repeat all of that. I'm gonna let you go first about your roots in the Southeast one more time for the
yeah.
people,
No problem.
because I made a mistake and I didn't hit the go live button, but we only got probably about 10, 15 minutes in, so it ain't the end of the world. So we'll
Yeah.
do it again. You go ahead, go first.
All right, and I hope that is not too bright. I got my other car just to make sure. Let me see if I can dim it.
Yeah. Man, I'm glad I caught that, man. I would have been so disappointed if you had
All
to
right,
went
well, let me
into.
just go ahead because I'm not gonna hold it up. So I was just mentioning that my background is West Indian and Black American, which I learned later. And my father used to say it actually. He's Jamaican, but he said all of us are Black American. He used to say that from like long time ago. You know
Mhm.
about how he said everybody like you would bring up stories from like the Revolutionary War about how the ones that sided with the British allegedly went to Jamaica and they had land and it's the story's mixed up. You know what I mean? That's all.
Hmm.
But anyhow, Jamaican background on my father's side and on my mother's side.
Hmm.
We come from the southeast, specifically Alabama. Uh, and a funny thing actually, in the town that she's from, Selma, right? She's
Yes.
from a street called Choctaw Boulevard, and I always like thought of like why would they name the street that? Like, and it's a bunch of former African slaves, as they said. You know, these are African slaves, but they're all living on a street that's called Choctaw Boulevard. And I've never known them to be sharecroppers either. You know,
Right.
which is something I learned later on that these are prisoners of war, actually generational prisoners of war. And when I went
Exactly.
to Selma, that's what it looked like. The one time that I've been there, I said this is a really weird town. It looked like what they tried to recreate of the Indian reservations out
Hmm.
in the Midwest and those areas out west, wherever that was at. I find that they tried to recreate that. You know what I mean? What they already had created in Selma and other towns in the South, Rosewood, and all those different places where they
Hmm.
didn't expect the people to thrive, and that's why you
Hmm.
had issues like with Tulsa and all that, where the people in here in the Southeast, like in Florida, like in Rosewood, where the people had built an economy and the local whites were jealous of it, and they burned it down. Learning about all those things is has been phenomenal, and I'm actually overwhelmed at the research, of what has been going on here in the United States that I ignored when I was
Hmm.
overseas. And I had some people talk to me about it, and I'm like, what are you talking about? We're not Indians. You know what I mean? That's where I was like, no, I heard that before. I always knew that was a thing from the culture, that there's some of us that are mixed with them and whatnot, and
Hmm.
some people say it, but I didn't realize the destiny swap that had took place. I
Yeah.
didn't realize that until and it mirrored something that I had just got done proving with a team of guys about the Middle East itself, that a lot of people don't know, is that for the longest time the Middle East itself was a melanated subcontinent of a place, and everybody knew it. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't a
Hmm.
secret that the people of the Arabian Peninsula resembled the people of Africa.
Hmm.
It wasn't a secret. It was just the way
Hmm.
it was.
Hmm.
And it's actually um uh, archived, we'll say, how they changed over time. And
Hmm.
it's archived in a very detailed kind of way. I'm sorry about the lights. I don't know what's going on. It's
Yeah, no problem.
archived in a very detailed way. very detailed, such that I was able to make connections between what happened in America and what happened there. For example,
Mhm.
right? I know I'm going off on a, I don't know if it's a tangent
Nah,
or
you go
whatever, but
ahead,
it's
man. You
just
got
some
the
things that
mic.
I've read is
Yeah.
that what I discovered just in my deep research, and I actually have built websites. I built a website, AmericanIndianBloodline.com, where I had the DNA testing where I made Black American its own reference panel. So if a person puts their raw DNA there, it'll match it to how close they are to that reference panel, as opposed to breaking up the different DNAs that they say, oh, this is Ghanaian, Nigerian. It's like, no, this is Black American, that's Ghanaian, that's Nigerian, that's Gambian, right? And then it breaks the percentages. And I got much more accurate numbers, in my opinion, where it said, predominantly Black American, a little bit African, right? Because they were here. They had them a little bit that they ran away to the wilderness and they met us and whatnot,
Mhm.
and then some European. Now, the European is what I want to talk about. My mother, so I took a DNA test, right? And
Mhm.
uh, most of my DNA relatives are here in America, right? If not the UK, Canada, maybe, right? In Jamaica.
Mhm.
Um, there's a bit of them that are white, And so what's the story they gave us is that, oh yeah, the slave masters, they did this and that with the women. And so that's why you are related to white people. That's the reason. Well, based off of what I realized about the Creek Wars and whatnot, my peoples weren't slaves for that long. They weren't slaves long enough for them to have generational, European slave, master blood there. It's not possible. They were slaves from the 1820s to the 1860s. That's it.
Exactly.
That's it. They weren't slaves that long. So
Mhm.
where's the whiteness coming from? The answer is when the United States of America entered upon the Indian nations, they found white people there. They were already there because they were runaways from like generations ago that had been absorbed into the tribe. You have people like White Warrior that basically betrayed the Creek Nation, and whatnot. You have stories like that, but there was already white people there. And so their goal was to divide them. The Indian tribe, the nation, it probably had a hierarchy with the Negroid people being at the top and then the white people being like their subjects or their people that had come to them or that were mixed with them. Because that's what makes sense for when they were reclassifying people. They would say, you're fully white, you are half white, you're this, you're that, right? The goal was to break up the nation and make them all fragmented. Because when you come across a lot of white people in the Southeast and you'll ask them, what are you? They'll say, I'm just white. It's like, well, what is your European background? I don't know. I'm just white. I think those people are the remnants of the Indian nation, the subjects of the Indian nation. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Of the white people that may or may not have been related to the black people, right? In some
Mhm.
situations because of generational mixing or whatever the case is. You understand what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
it's possible. And that's the reason why I knew about that or even had any knowledge of that is because of what happened in the Middle East, right?
Mhm.
Those people that you see in the Middle East right now are either descendants of slaves or mixed with them heavily. The people you see that look like people from Europe and from Russia and whatnot, those are not the original inhabitants of
Mhm.
Palestine, of Saudi Arabia, of Yemen, of any of those places,
None of
right?
that.
They were entered into the peninsula through slave trading. And they
Mhm.
were integrated into the tribes and given tribal names, just like what happened in America. The people were given tribal, and so that's why they were able to say, like the I don't know if you've read the reclassification things. They're mad weird. It'll say like, okay, like if you are like, and they're going based off of appearance only. They were like, if you are 1/4 Indian and the
Mhm.
rest white, you are to be considered fully Indian. That person that they're considered Indian, that was 3/4 white and 1/4, that 1/4 could be a Negroid phenotype guy that he's
Mhm.
descending from. You understand? Like a straight up Negroid Indian, right? But it doesn't
Mhm.
matter. They're looking at them and saying, okay, we're okay with you being an Indian, right? And then
Mhm.
it'll be a person that they're descending from the same man, but he looks more like the forefather. That's Negroid phenotype. They said, no, you're fully African, right? And they just stripped the person of their identity. That's what happened in the Middle East. And that's what's happening even right now with many of the tribes that are like, we don't know them to descend from Africans, but they're like, nope, look at what they look like, right? They don't look like a certain thing, therefore they're not a certain thing. That's what they did here, and that was what the whole what's his name, Plecker, Richard Plecker, whatever his name was. His whole
Yeah.
issue was that these people look like radically different from what I want them to look like, because
Mm-hmm.
there's stories about battles where they defeated us. There's stories where they captured white women, right? There's stories where they scalpeled people and did all sorts of stuff. We don't want that to be the image of them. We're okay with a near white people. And you'll
Yeah.
see that like echoed across the world. Like, okay, we believe the Romans were great, but they were a near white people. The Arabs are a near white people, the Berbers,
Mm-hmm.
all these people, but
Mm-hmm.
nobody's like, they don't, it's war against a specific phenotype all
Mm-hmm.
over the world. Even
Yeah.
the people of Papua, Papua New Guinea out in Pacific Islands,
Mm-hmm.
they're being oppressed by Indonesia. Indonesia is stealing their natural resources. And why is it that they feel bold to do that? Is because they're black and they're not black. That's really what it is. That's really how it boils down to, right? They
Mm-hmm.
feel that we're more like the Europeans that colonized us. You guys are primitive. You guys are still in your tribes. We deserve to have your bauxite natural resources for ourselves. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's wild. It's like it's a global thing. Global.
So, not to cut you off, but I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I understood you about, like I'm gonna call them miscellaneous white people.
Yeah. Yeah.
No offense, my white people, man. I'm
Yeah.
just terming it like that so we can like have a
Yeah.
designation to like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
separate these white people from other
The
white people.
colonizing ones. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So like you were saying, like there were white people already here before
Okay.
Columbus.
Well, okay. Okay. No. 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 I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
Okay.
Okay. So if you look at what the Civil War was really about,
Mm-hmm.
the Civil War was to stop the spread of white slavery. That was really what it was about, because they had all these territories they were acquiring, and they feared like it was clear that the 13 colonies were trying to promote white supremacy. Very clear. And underhandedly. It wasn't so clear though. That's what's scary about it, because the Moors that were in the Americas, it's like somehow, some way, and they may hate this, but it seems like they side with the white supremacists
Mm-hmm.
and dilute their bloodline. They dilute their bloodline deliberately. And the
Mm-hmm.
ones that descend from them right now, they know that they descend from black Moors. You know what I mean? Like, right, but they're part of the elite, or something like that. But those miscellaneous white people that you're talking about, they were like indentured servants and slaves that were in the Americas, that a lot of them ran away, right? And they ended up in Indian territory, and the Indians were super friendly people. They incorporated them, they educated them, they civilized them, right? And it was also they took captives in the raids. They would raid colonial settlements and capture men, women, and children, right? Taking them back to the tribe. This is really what it's about, right? And this is what, I concluded the reason why there's always a big cover up in history, right? It's the same story everywhere in the world. And people should go to realhistoryww.com. That
Okay.
website, people don't know about that website. It's got nothing but truth about the blackness of every society. And it's funny story, kind of a side note, just to show that this information is being attacked. The server that was hosting that website from over 20 years ago with all this information, a lot where I learned about a lot of this stuff from, the guy died or something like that owned the server, and his children inherited it. So then they just did like a quick, kind of look at what websites were being hosted, and they deleted their website for no reason. They just said, I'm gonna take that crap down, right? So those guys had to go and find another host or something like that, and they put it up there. They said, this is what they did to us. So it's like, if our information is all this Afrocentric conspiracy theories, why do you want to take it down? Just let us have our fun, have our fantasy. It's like Star Wars, right? It's like Star Wars and Dragon Ball Z. We're just talking, right? None of this stuff is true. They know it's true.
Yeah.
They know it's true. They know it's true, right?
Yeah.
And so, anyways, right? Those people, the fear was of black people doing what they had been doing for most of the world's existence, and that was capturing white people and making them their slaves. Because that's all after Spain fell, right? And the Moors had to run. Everybody on the coast of North Africa, they went on like a rampage of raiding like random towns and cities on Southern Europe and selling the men, women, and children across the Middle East and Africa for like the next, few centuries, all the way into the time of Thomas Jefferson, such that Americans were captured and Thomas Jefferson had to broker a deal for them to get back to America. The fear was of the Black Indian nations rising and doing that. Because if they had weapons, the United States of America would be different right now. They didn't have, they had primitive, they were using bow and arrows and swords and stuff. They had cannons and guns. You know, that's why it was easier for them to, and they infiltrated the tribes, unfortunately, through the white people. A lot of the times, through the mixed people and the white people, they infiltrated and they were able to divide it and cause division and whatnot. Some of them did right when they claimed us as their slaves and took us on the Trail of Tears. There's a story behind that, you know, that some of them, it was like they were friends, they were companions, and they just said that they were their slaves, but they weren't really their slaves. You know, it could have been the other way around. And the funny thing is how history repeats. There's a story from the early period of, like, we say, like the Islamic expansion time, right? And in that time, Persians were typically the slaves of Black Arabs. It was just how it was, right? And they were like companions, though. It wasn't just like a slave. So there was a story where a wealthy guy was in a different land where he wasn't from, right? And he was accused of theft. So he was about to be taken and punished for it. And so there was a Persian guy there that he recognized. He's like, that was one of my father's former slaves. So he spoke to him in Persian, and he was like, I didn't know you were here. Let me get you out of this situation. So he doesn't know this guy was a slave of this guy when he was a child, right? But they're in a different land right now. Nobody knows them, right? So now the slave is the one that's helping him out, right? And I think that's what used to happen, that you had the so-called Mongoloid looking, you know, natives, that they like to call that, and the mixed ones of the runaways that were white and whatnot that came among them, and probably because of the hierarchy would only mix with the Mongoloid looking ones, right? And see, this is where we're getting that appearance where, like, this is the appearance of the originals. You made them the originals, just like when the Europeans went to the Middle East, they made the former slaves the Arabs, and they made the Arabs the African imports, slaves, without any evidence. When we go to the books, we see a different story. You know, so we see the same thing happening in the Americas, just like it happened in India, just like it happened in even in parts of Africa, where people are in denial about what the indigenous people looked like. You know what I mean? Of North Africa, the entire continent was Black. North Africa too, you know, all of it. You know, lots of history, you know.
Definitely. So like I remember, you know, and that's probably in part what you were just talking about. You said when you were living in Africa, you came across some basically like some ancient or some old books that had the indigenous history of these regions. Did I get that right?
A lot of it. Yeah. Some books I did come across that recorded some old information, things that would surprise people, such as people talk about Bantu, where they say the Bantu archetype is the African, the pure African. They don't know that there's history that says the Bantu came from Asia, from the Africans themselves. From the Africans themselves, they're like, these people came from Asia, right? In fact, everybody in Africa has a story of coming from somewhere else.
Right.
Everybody. And if you go to their griot or griot, whatever you call them, their elder, and just like, you know, like pick their brain, they'll get to a point. Some of them don't even believe they're from the planet Earth. The Dogon believe that they're from the planet Sirius Star, right? They believe that.
Right.
And then they stopped saying it because they knew it sounded weird to the Europeans. They're like, all right, we're not going to say that anymore, right? But you have others, right? Most of them claim to be from Mesopotamia. Most of them claim to be from Asia, right? But they don't say it out loud because they know that that's something that the Europeans were not, you know, in agreement with.
Right. It didn't go along with the indoctrination. You ain't got nobody creeping on you, do you?
Checking. We don't have any issues like that around here. This is like a retirement community.
Okay,
old people.
all right.
Old people.
Just looking out for you, man. You know, I can't have nothing happening to you on my live.
It's like, is Mr. Townsend is tripping right now? Like, what is he doing? No, I'm good.
All right, cool. Yeah, you know, I heard that about the Dogon. I've heard them say it on video. So
they have a lot of knowledge of something. I don't know how they know about that, but like I'm still in my exploration phase when it comes to like the earth and cosmos and all that. Like, I don't know what's possible and what's not, to be completely honest. Like, we've been fed a story about something, but like, I used to like sit and build with like random people, like Romanian girls, and they were like into science and stuff. And they would tell me about stuff from World War II that they heard from the elders in Europe about like teleportation that was attempted by the Nazis, that it kind of worked halfway, but the guy died in the process, like weird stuff like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like the Philadelphia experiment here in the United States, that's what that was about.
Yep.
And when you look up the testimonies, I'll say alleged, because
Yeah.
you know the United States government now is trying to say that these things didn't happen,
Right.
but the alleged testimonies from the crew members that were part of the Philadelphia experiment, and that experiment was about teleportation,
Yeah.
because the military was trying to master teleportation, which involved the manipulation of time, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what they were doing was, since they were manipulating time, you're basically manipulating uh what's the word for it? I don't want to say, it's not physiology, it's physics.
Yeah.
You're
Physics. Yeah.
manipulating physics. You're manipulating astrophysics as well. So what people ended up being, what happened to people was, the ones that survived, it was like two things happened. Either when you went through this experiment, when you came out on the other side, either you kind of like lost your mind from the experience, or people were physically meshed to the ship.
Mm,
Because what was going on was, the experiment and the experience was changing their body molecularly, at a molecular
mm,
level.
yeah.
And what was supposed to happen, if it went the way it was supposed to go,
Yeah.
by the time you came out on the other side, your molecular structure was supposed to be back intact. But some people, it just didn't go that way for everybody. So,
Crazy.
like, people were literally meshed to the ship.
Dang.
You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna try to dig that up and maybe
I'm gonna look into
put it
that.
on my
Actually, that's interesting.
yeah, I'm gonna try to dig those clips up and put it on my Lifted Veil face Facebook group page. I don't know if you're
Yeah.
aware,
Yeah.
but I started that probably like sometime earlier this week,
Yeah.
just so I can, like, get everything that I'm putting out into the algorithm. And since we're talking about the Middle East, I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna let you get back to what you were saying,
Yeah.
because you harping on exactly what I thought you was gonna harp on.
Yeah.
Because we met informally through Facebook. If you
Mm,
can remember, we were talking about the Gullah language.
yeah.
And her name Sharice Nicole's, man, she was trying to bang on us hard, right? So I'm in there
Oh.
like, all the West African languages, they weren't written down until like 1850 and 1930. And then and the first time they were written down, it was written in Arabic first, and
Yeah.
then they didn't write it into like some type of
Yeah.
African script until like 1930 or something like that.
Yeah.
And she was trying to bang on me when I was saying that, but then you chimed in like, yeah, that's, I spent some
Yeah.
time over there. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
they have a lot of influence from Arabic culture and language.
Yeah.
So you're going in the direction that I wanted you to go. But what I was gonna
Mm,
say, to add in to what you were saying earlier about that region being black. So like, look, so I don't know if you caught the Kennewick series that I did. I've done 2 parts to
no.
it, and I put it up. The reason why I'm connecting what you're saying to it is because what people don't know, because the narrative does not match the genetic study results.
Yeah.
Okay, what they're trying to say is that, they try to perpetuate it. They'll say that Kennewick man was European, right?
Mm,
And so the secondary sources will twist it, and they'll say, yeah, he was white European. But
mm,
the studies never determined that. Now I got to look at the first one again, but the second one that I focused on was done after the initial study.
mm,
But from what I understand, even the first one never determined that he was purely Native American. They tried to say that he was most related to modern day Native Americans. So the 2018 study goes on to say, well, that's because they use this certain type of method that can make genetics appear like these two groups are distant from each other or closer to each other.
Yeah.
So that second study concluded that Kennewick man had Eurasian, Eurasian ancestry. And the key thing about it, what's connecting it to what you just said earlier, is it's not European, because at that time the European populations, in terms of how we understand it in contemporary times, had not been differentiated yet. They were only Eurasian, and they were Black Eurasian, because the 2022 article states that this population existed 40,000 years ago in Europe. That's significant because the depigmentation alleles didn't exist in the genome yet. So it was impossible for anybody at that time to be anything less than deeply melanated.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the other significant part is that both the 2022, the 2018, and the 2015 article says that Kennewick man got his gene flow from West Eurasia. You see what I'm saying? That was the same population. So that same population, and here's the thing too, and I don't want to spit it all out before I actually do it, you know what I mean? But that gene flow originated from Southeast Asia and Oceania. It goes out to Eurasia, and that is the original genome for Eurasia.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is that the fossil evidence only points from our direction to Africa, and even in ancient times, even though they're trying to make it look like this out of Africa thing, the fossil evidence that they found, all of the gene flow is coming from the opposite direction. Southeast Asia and Oceania input most of the gene flow into West Eurasia, Europe, and North Africa. And later on, that trickled down into West Africa. And so I'm gonna connect all of that, and I'll probably do a third part of the Kennewick man and make that connection and demonstrate with genetic studies, not just I'm just making it up and I'm just just because I want it to be. No, this is coming from genetic studies. The problem is that even though the genetic studies points to this, they might not draw like a complete line to say here is the conclusion. You know what I mean? These were Black Eurasians.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? With gene flow from all the way over here. And then it went over here and then went back. And Kennewick man is actually a Black Eurasian.
But you want to know something, right? When you talk about like Khazarians, right? People talk about them. I have a clear text describing the Khazarians of two types in Arabic, right? It said there is the black type and then there is the white type. Even at that time that it was being recorded, which was like the 800s, 900s, something like that. So they existed up until even then, that it was well known that there are, and this is one of the things that a lot of the so-called Native Americans and others in the groups bring up. How can you people be indigenous to Alaska? It's cold there. And so what? Black skin is actually better for the cold than anything. It can handle the cold. It can handle all weather types. This is the original skin of human beings, right? So this is just what it is. And I think I see a lot like with it, it's a lot of jealousy. You know what I mean? When you bring up a lot of the things, because what you just said, it helped me to connect back to Alaska of like how the Russians described them. They said these people are dark and it doesn't seem to be from the sun. They said it's not from the sun. They're just dark like that. These people have wiry, unruly hair. And I find it very bizarre that anybody can see that description and not judge that to be a Black person. Like,
right. They, they wanna, they want to, like, nowadays they want to ambiguously attach themselves to all of our phenotypes. You know what I mean?
Bizarre.
They'll say, dark skin isn't significant to black people. You know what I mean? Like, listen, and I'm like, listen, you're not gonna have dark skin without a melanated person close in your ancestry.
Exactly.
It's not it's deeply hereditary.
Yeah.
These people try to act like all of these phenotypes, like hair is
And you know
deeply
what I find
hereditary.
interesting? You know what I find interesting about the so-called indigenous phenotype of America that they call the indigenous phenotype
Yeah.
is how easily it was washed away. Like a lot of these people that you meet, like there was a girl I knew in school. She
Mhm.
was all this about being indigenous and whatnot. She was real pale complexion and whatnot. And she, eventually it came out that she's actually Polish. She has a lot of Polish and about being Polish.
Mhm.
And it's like, you guys don't even look like the people that you're showing pictures of. Sometimes I have a picture of a real, I'll say kind of dark, straight haired guy. And I just don't think there was enough of them here for them to be the base population of America. And, this is something a Jamaican had pointed out. He said, we're told that the Arawak that don't look anything like us were all over the island at one time,
Mhm.
right? Then the Europeans killed all of them. So they got on a boat, went all the way to Africa, and got a whole bunch of people to repopulate the place and be the workers there. It doesn't make any sense.
It
It
don't
just
make sense at all, man.
it doesn't make any sense. Like, mm-mm.
And like I just did a series because I was getting tired of it, man. I did a series on Native American genotypes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't something, like I said, man. It's not something that I'm just making up on the fly. These are genetic studies that you can pull. But what I did was, instead of pulling like each individual phenotype from like 10 different studies and having to sift through like 10, 15, 20 different studies for each type of, genotype I was, trying to focus on. I just pulled probably about 3 articles just to build the groundwork for what I was saying. But what I did was I had AI generate, what their genome carried in terms of pigmentation, in terms of hair type. What else?
Mm,
What else did I do? I did hair type, pigmentation. Um, eye color was in there as well,
yeah.
but that was the main three. And
Yeah.
so what was found, and I had it, uh, design me some visual charts, so people can have some visuals, while they're listening to what I'm saying. And so what's interesting about it is that there's a certain gene, and it's the acronym is EDAR. And so the EDAR gene, I'll have to go back and look to see if that's just the gene significant to Native Americans. But regardless of that, the function of the EDAR in Native Americans dictates that they only have one dominant hair type, and that's
Mm,
thick, long black hair.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So anything in terms of wavy, curly is unlikely. But when you get down to kinky and woolly, the AI is determining that's impossible for Native Americans. And
Mm,
that's what I was getting at.
yeah.
Like, Native Americans are still with us today. They're not extinct. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's been recent genetic studies done on their genotype.
Yeah.
And so the studies are just like, for one, you mentioned that you felt like there was too few of them to account for everybody that was already here. Well, the studies that I presented on that video specifically, it doesn't say there was too few for them to account for who was already here, but it does say that they feel like it was no more than 400 people that migrated in representing them. But see, the thing is,
400.
400, I
So
swear.
400 of the Siberian type person.
Right. And here's the thing. Here's the twist, though. Right. This is how I'm putting it together. With my own discernment. Like, everybody's got to have some type of like third eye discernment when you're reading these things. You're reading history, especially genetic studies, because for whatever reason they tell us the truth, but they still hide things in plain sight, if that makes sense.
No, no, absolutely.
So, like, even though the genetic study is saying clearly that Kennewick Man was admixed, You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
they told you what population he was admixed with. But the thing you got to do is you got to understand what that population was.
Yeah.
And so that might take you reading another genetic study to figure out that that population existed so long ago
Yeah.
that there were no non-melanated people around at
Yeah.
that time
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
the genes
Exactly.
didn't exist in the genome yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but my point that I was trying to make is that I think that I know they're trying to conflate and confuse those 250 to 400 people with the same population as Kennewick man that really did migrate into the Americas. But I believe
See,
that
I
was
see what
like
you're getting at.
historical.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
That's the thing.
because
There's a woman on TikTok, and her stuff is published. I don't just follow anybody. She's got published material. I think she's called Northern Awakening or True
okay,
Northern Awakening. She has a pretty good information on there, and she mentions about her ancestor that was a European, and she's got documented evidence that this ancestor was a European, right? And she said like this is a black ancestor. It's a well-known black ancestor, right? She talks about that. And then she mentioned that even in her DNA, a lot of the European that we're getting, whether it's Eurasian or European in general, it's European from like a really, really long time ago. It's
so
European,
yeah,
like even these Europeans now, they may or may not descend from those Europeans, right? We're descending from some Europeans that were like black, you know what I mean? Like really, we're
yeah,
not descending from the same Europeans as them. And so it helps the narrative of like, oh yeah, after you guys were slaves, the master raped the woman, and that's how you came about, and that's why you guys have your very unique appearance, right? And this was the other thing that I think we did touch on in the comments a little bit about Africa and being overseas and whatnot, and the difference in appearance, right? And people, they say, no, you guys are reaching with that. You look, identical. No, it's not. Not in West Africa, not East. In fact, I would say that East Africa, a place that is well known, we don't come from, right? It's not even one of the theories. It's not even one of the arguments. We have more in common with them in terms of appearance, which is not that strange if we go with the idea that we are more related to Pacific Islanders, right?
mhm,
Because they have a lot in common with Pacific Islanders in terms of their language and in terms of just their habits, right? Like
mhm.
East Africans, but we don't descend from, there's no theory that we ever came from East Africa. You
But I
understand what
tell
I'm
you
saying?
what though, I tell you what, like the statistics, the averages say that excuse me, the averages say that about anywhere to 60 to 70% of African so-called African American men carry the E1B1A, right?
Mm,
But when you study the E1B1A, the in the in terms of the out of Africa construct,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? I'm speaking from the out of Africa construct. Even though me and you, we see errors in that construct,
yeah,
but
yeah.
even in that construct, what's kind of interesting and peculiar is that the E lineage is seen first, allegedly, in the Northeast Africa. Really, the East starts in Sudan.
Yeah.
Historically, in terms of like phylogenetic, science, they have the E originating in Sudan. But here's the thing, though.
E is interesting to me. E is very interesting. E is
Yeah,
very
and see,
interesting.
the
I'll tell
interesting
you. I'll tell
part
you why.
is,
One
go
thing
ahead.
I will mention, not to take you from that point because it's very short,
Mm-hmm,
but the E1B1 haplogroup,
mm-hmm.
it travels along with the Arabic or Islamic, if you will, conquests as they go out. You could see it. There was a white dude online that mapped it. He said, like, watch, E is spreading from Arabia. It's spread, which indicates those people were black, right?
Absolutely.
And it indicates also, and I can't seem to find the link because the E1B1, if that is the Arabian, kind of thing, it's also the Hebrew one, right? It has
Yes.
to be the same one, right? To where I looked at some of the theories about the Black American Indians and their connection to Hebrews. Like, I don't know if I'm saying their name right, the Algonquin, I don't know how to say their name,
It's close
but
enough.
they were the ones that were fighting with the Europeans, and they used to have a practice where they would take a coffin-like box with them into battle like the Israelites used to do when they would fight in battles. It was a box of things that belonged to Moses, right? And they had that practice as well. And I'm like, where did they get that from? You know what I mean? These are people that had never been. We can't say that they were in contact with missionaries or the Holy Roman Empire. They weren't. You know, so how did they know about that unless they're an ancient people, very ancient people? You know, from like, you know, yeah. But go on. Sorry about E1.
Okay, so like what's interesting, because and this is the whole point of us having this powwow. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? I think the community needs to do it more often. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times things are in your subconscious mind, and then when you start talking about it, it starts coming out.
yeah,
You know, when you hear other people talk about something, it kind of triggers memories.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
you just triggered another memory in that you were saying that East Africans share, language similarities with Pacific Islanders, right?
Yes, yes.
So what's interesting is
All
that
the way to Japan. All the way to
yes,
Japan. The Japanese, when they speak,
mhm,
Swahili speakers, they don't understand what they're saying, but it sounds like sentences in their language. They said that sounds funny what they're saying, but they know it's not what they're saying. It's just the sounds are the same and it sounds clear to them like
mhm,
sentences. You know what I mean? Like
mhm,
whole sentences, which is bizarre. But yeah,
right,
Kikuyus, actually Kikuyus, they are the ruling people of Kenya, you know, because of their numbers, and their language sounds like Chinese, and they know that it sounds like Chinese. There was a Kikuyu in China teaching the children in China how to speak their language because the way that the pronunciation is so similar. So like
mhm,
something about that part of Asia, that ocean in East Africa, there's some connection, right? There's something there.
absolutely,
There's something
absolutely.
there, you know?
And what I was gonna say is that on another like episode that I did earlier, and this is really when I was getting started. I couldn't even figure out how to get on StreamYard, so I was doing everything live. The feed was looking tacky. I was looking horrible on there because it
Oh
wasn't,
yeah.
it wasn't high enough of a resolution, but I was getting it done
Yeah,
the best
yeah.
way that I could. But
Yeah.
I got into like a back and forth with somebody. Um, and we didn't do it live. The back and forth wasn't live, but what we were doing was he came in on a episode that I titled African Americans Are Not West African. You
Mm,
know, two anomalies for, so-called Black Americans, but I titled that like that on purpose to get people's attention to watch.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So, but anyway, during the discussion, we went back and forth. I would make one, he would make one in response to mine, and we probably did that about 2 or 3 times. But what came up as an interesting topic is that we were debating whether or not the DE split. I don't know if you're familiar with the DE superclade, but
Mm.
um the E haplogroup, the YDNA
Question. I know the
mhm,
lighting is not good on my end, but does this bother you?
not at all.
Okay, because I'm doing the light. I'm like, it's kind of, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
go
not
on.
at all, man. We gonna get this done the best way that we can. We did this impromptu, bro. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
good, good,
Like
good, yeah.
we have, you had to handle your business. I came in straight off the road, man,
Oh, okay, yeah,
and,
yeah.
and, and jumped into this live. So I mean, we'll probably, this won't be the last time we'll do it, man. So we
Yeah,
ain't
and
gotta be
I'll get
perfect.
it better next time, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. We ain't, it ain't gotta be perfect this time, man. It's we got plenty much more to talk about. But
Yep, yep.
what I was gonna say is that we were debating back and forth about the concept of the DE superclade.
Yeah.
Now, Michael Hammer first reported on it in 1999. And his initial report, I think even 1999 and the one he did in 2003, and I'm going to explain it. The DE superclade is what the E lineage split from. It was a part of a
Okay.
superclade called the DE superclade.
Okay.
And so, of course, if it's split, that means it's a D lineage as well. Now, you just
Okay.
happen to mention populations in Japan.
Yeah.
Now, there's a population in Japan, China, and Southeast Asia that is supposed to be the sister lineage to the E. And
Oh,
so
okay.
what I'm saying is that you got the D all the way over in East Asia, and you got the E allegedly in Africa with no
Okay.
fossil evidence in between for the D. And so what Michael Hammer determined in 99 and 2003 was like, listen, I can't determine whether the DE split in Africa or East Asia. He was like, because we got the D all the way in East Asia, that is definitely the sister lineage to the E, because they carry the Yap positive marker. And those are the only two lineages that carry that marker. So
Mm,
it's non-subjective. And
mm,
so, he was like, since you have them split like that, he was like, I can't, it's like a 50-50 chance that they could have split in East Asia, or they could have split in Africa. And
mm.
so what people are trying to say is like, nah, geneticists are not arguing about that no more. They've only said out of Africa, and it's not. They've leaned more towards Africa, because you know how they do it. Just like
Yeah.
with Albert Perry, when his DNA was found, when that A00 was found in Albert Perry first, they had the Central West African, you know, blood samples in that bank the
Yeah.
whole time, and they never
Yeah.
found the A00 in them. But all of a sudden, when Albert Perry has the A00, then they hurry up, and all of a sudden now they got A00 in Central West Africa as well. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
did was they found a DO in Nigeria, allegedly,
Yeah.
because what it was looking like was, this out of Africa is getting hard for us to prove, because we got all of the gene flow. Even the E is coming from East Asia with
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sister
See,
brother,
I
the
never
T.
got too deep into that, but there were
Yeah,
some guys that I was with, some researchers, and they were like basically talking about Egypt. And they said, that when they dug deep enough in Egypt, they found that it was a black origin society. It was definitely black people were the first. And
yeah,
they didn't like that. So they said, we got to go look for a non-black origin. So they went to the Middle East and started digging, and they found more black people. Right. So then they came up with the concept of the dark Caucasian, the white, the black skinned Caucasian. They said, okay,
yeah,
they were black, but they were still white.
right,
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. I mean, they play with, I think what is played with a lot is appearance. Like, don't you
hmm,
think they'll use appearance, like modern appearances, in order to determine things of the
absolutely,
past? Because we live in a society of what is politically correct, right? And I learned that that's not always the case when it comes to history of being politically correct. Like, there was a period of time where there were no white people. They weren't around. There weren't any, right?
period,
And we can't just say, oh, well, just to be fair, everybody has always been around. No, everybody has not always been around. That's not historically accurate, not scientifically accurate either, right? As you
you're right,
mentioned. So yeah,
right.
yeah,
That's extremely difficult for people to accept,
yeah,
because of the indoctrination.
yeah.
They've subjugated, they've relegated, you know, black populations around the world to just primitive.
Primitive, or from I was I put I'm a teacher, and I put on a old film for my students the other day.
Yeah,
And it's a movie that has, some old things, like about an ancient time. And I'm noticing that every single society they showed in the movie is having black slaves. Everybody, that's just like all black people were used for at that time. It's just
yeah.
slaves. And people actually believe it, and they repeat it. And then when you correct them, you get called all sorts of names: racist, Afrocentrist, we was kangs, all this other stuff they say, right? You
All
know,
types of mockeries,
all
man.
types of things. And it's like,
Yeah,
these things are documented, very much documented. And it's a wonder, that people are waking up as much as they are now. Because I grew up with this. This is something that my father talked to me about, that I read about when I was younger, specifically about black people of the world, not about the Americas. The Americas, I used to learn about more so the inventions we did, and why we were great, and we were cut out from the military, and then this happened. But it was more so like recent stuff. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Not like we are the custodians of this land. We were in wars with these people. But I think something inside of us knew, like why was it that my great grandmother felt the need to take my mother aside and say, we are Indians? Like, why did she do that? Because if I look at her age, she was a little girl at the time when the indoctrination was heavy. Like, my great grandmother, when I'm looking at the timeline, you know what I mean?
hmm,
But to know that we are the people that are indigenous to these places that we actually hold really dear, the Southeast, to be told you're actually from Nigeria is kind of an insult. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? To be told you
Right.
are not from Mississippi, you are not from Alabama, you're not really from those places. And with Africans, I'll say like there is a, I don't want to get too carried away when I talk about the jealousy thing, but it's there though, and I say this having lived in Africa, and having been around people when it comes to their knowledge that you are a Black American, like the ones on TV, right? Because if you're ever in Africa, they'll want to assume, well, you obviously are here because your parents are from here. But when you make it clear, no, I'm not from here at all. What about your grandfather? No, like nobody, we're not from here at all. I was just told this is my ancestral homeland,
Yeah.
right? We were told that's it. That's all we know about this place,
Right.
right? Sometimes you'll find them getting offended. You'll find them getting offended when you take pride
Of
in where you
course.
came from.
Yeah. Yeah. Of
Because their
course.
assumption was that you're coming to learn what you are, but it's like, no, I'm not you, and you're not me. We're two different things, and I'm not a, because they see us to be in a, like, not to say the oppression isn't real here in America,
Mhm.
but they see us to be so oppressed that we can't do anything. Like none of
Yeah.
us are educated. There's no billionaires from us. There's no, we don't own anything. We're just kind of like, the freed slaves that are roaming around committing crimes. That's the
Right.
way they see us all over the world, right? And it's a shame, but yeah,
Yeah. And what's interesting, man, is like, they think that, but you know what I'm saying? Like this country wouldn't have been what it was without the engineering skills of
yeah,
Black Americans.
yeah, yeah,
Because once you put our history together with indigenous ancestry, then it all starts to make sense why
exactly.
Black people just naturally were
Yeah,
great engineers because
yeah,
they're the remnant of their ancestors.
yes, yes,
They're the remnant after all of the oppression and subjugation.
yeah,
After all of that stuff was like literally beat out of us. Even if for families from lineages that didn't even suffer through slavery, who may have been freed men during that whole time, because like you
yeah,
said,
yeah,
because of the indigenous political makeup in the South, because of indigenous politics, it didn't reach our region until after
yeah. After
that treaty was signed.
the treaty was like, yeah, it was like, and it was a really, really bad deal, and it was like,
Yeah.
the people ended up like, and when you think about erase, like whether it's um implanting something in a people or erasing something from a people. Like if right now the United States of America decided, Chinese is getting big, we need kids speaking Chinese by the end of high school, right? They can implement programs to make sure that kids are speaking Chinese by the end of high school. It's not hard, right? It's just that they really don't want us to be multilingual in America. In reality,
Right.
that's part of
Right.
that's part of the oppression. We don't really know the indigenous languages anymore. We don't know anything, right? We just know
Right.
what they gave us, right?
Right.
And we think that's all reality is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what happened to the people in the Southeast specifically, is
Mm-hmm.
while they're moving people around, they're also creating curriculum for schools and indoctrinating them with stuff. And it's so crazy that when you look at the record of the stuff they're being indoctrinated with, it's not even the same stuff. There's people who died believing that they are a Negro. That's all I am. I'm a Negro, or I'm colored, and then
Right.
eventually African American, like all these different stories. You keep giving me different names that don't really
Unfortunately.
point to what I am. You're
Right.
just you're beating around the bush. What does that mean?
Right.
What, like
Yeah. It's a shame. Like, our history, when you really tell it the way that it is, man, it would have been the biggest robbery in history, period. But the reason why it was the biggest robbery in history is because the bloodline was worldwide. You know what I'm saying? It
yeah,
wasn't just indigenous to America. Because just like I said, like, I'm not saying, like, when I say bloodline, I'm not saying that the bloodline that was in Europe is exactly the
no,
same.
I get it. No, I get it.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like they have allele characteristics that's characteristic of Europe.
yeah,
You know what I mean? When you break their genome down, it's gonna look European. You know
yeah,
what I mean? But that's because that's the land that they're on.
Yeah.
You break our genome down, even though they try to convolute it with West Africa, even if you base it off of the slave trade, we haven't been in West Africa in like 500 years. You know what I'm saying? We've been on this land for 500 years basically or more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so even with that narrative, we would have developed, American characteristics. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So like, I'm not saying it's, that we're identical, but in some ways it's the same bloodline. Like
No, no,
it's
and I think that's why it makes it so easy for lies to be told,
Mhm.
because to the untrained person, whether in terms of research or the untrained eye, in my opinion, because I would say that in Africa, I can spot a Black American from a crowd, and I'm not even. People say, "Oh, you're just making that up." No, I'm saying because I've done it before. I was in a crowd in Africa, in Kenya, and everybody there was of the different. And mind you, Mombasa, Kenya, is a diverse place. You got light skinned people, dark skinned people. You got even different races. They're Indians, all sorts. There was one man that stood up, and like my eyes went directly to him. I said, "That guy's from the States." And I'm not just saying it because of like his demeanor or how he was dressed like the people there. Right. And so I caught him outside, and sure enough, he was from Connecticut. Sure. Like I knew it. And there was another time when I was in Saudi Arabia, there was a guy that, again, I'm around dozens, I mean, hundreds of African students. And then there's me. I was the only student from America. And there was once I saw a guy, and I'm like, yo, that guy. And um, he looked just like Parrish from EPMD. He looked just like him. And I
word.
looked at him and I was like, and like everybody was like, that's the new guy from France, but his origin is from Martinique, the Caribbean. So I'm like, that's why I know I can see them, and I know, for
Mhm.
sure, that dude. Now the only place that it got confusing for me, and this is why it's weird, was Kenya, right? In East Africa. But you'll have something like I see a dude with like Michael Jordan's face, but not his body type at all. Like nobody, you know what I mean? I'm just like, I've seen people before. I've seen a guy look like DMX before,
Yeah,
face, but not the body type.
right.
Like little things like that more than West Africa. And we're supposed to be West African, but I don't see a lot of West Africans that look like us. Like I'm saying, to where I can identify, yo, you look like my aunt, you look like this person. No, I can see that more in East Africa. I could see that more in Saudi Arabia with the Black population there. And they're like Asian Black people. You understand? This is why I'm saying, like, I don't think the connection is to West Africa. I think it's another connection to other types of Black people, whether
This
it's the Pacific Islands or whatnot.
this is what I was getting at earlier, and I forgot to finish the point. But so like they have the E lineage based on the out of Africa construct. They have the E lineage starting in Sudan after it split from the DE superclade, right? So it's in Sudan. It differentiates into E1 at some point. That E1 goes into North Africa, Northeast Africa. It traverses over to the Levant, comes back, and then eventually it differentiates into the E1B1A, which was supposed to be phylogenetically like I think like anywhere between 20 to 25,000 years ago.
Hmm.
Now, if you remember now, the Bantu expansion now, that timeline has been changed as early as the 1500s now.
Really?
Yeah.
The
So
1500s?
yeah, the 1500s, I swear.
I
Yeah.
have to see that research because I know
I'm
some
sorry. I'm
people.
sorry. 1500 years ago.
Oh, okay, okay. I was about to
Yeah,
say,
yeah.
well,
1500 years ago.
but still,
Yeah.
1500 years ago is nothing. I thought that the Bantu expansion happened like 3,000, 4,000 years ago.
Eventually, but even at even if you use at first it was like 10,000 years, right?
Yeah.
Then it went from 10,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 3. Now it's 1500, right? And
Mm.
I gotta go back and check. I think some people are saying um 15 that might have been 1500 BCE. I gotta go check. Nah, it couldn't have been 1500 BCE. I gotta go check, man. It might have said the 1500s. I gotta go back and look. I don't
Because
want to
if
say the
it's
wrong
the
thing.
1500s, that's bizarre. Like,
Right.
really? Because they
They're
they
giving a
don't they
range now.
argue,
They're
but don't
giving a
they argue
range.
that the Bantu expansion took place from West Africa, right?
There, yeah,
Which,
yeah, yeah. It,
which
it,
I
it took
but that's
place.
the weirdest thing because
Mhm.
people, modern West Africans, say they're not Bantu. modern West Africans, they say we're not Bantus. They'll say, yeah, we have like the Negroid phenotype, but we're not Bantu people, right? And now this is the weird thing about even the word Bantu, according to people who speak that, it just means people. It's similar to Swahili. They say Mantu, right? It just means people. You know,
Mhm.
like it means people. It's just and that's the interesting other thing, because a lot of people will say Bantu this and that. We
Yeah.
really don't know what those people looked like, to be completely frank. We don't know exactly what they were black, definitely, but what was their exact phenotype, their exact hair texture, their exact heights? We don't really know. They're just called people, right? They could have been a multitude of complexions, body
It
types, all that.
being that they came from the West, just like you said, is interesting because the original E1B1A, based on the out of Africa construct, was predominantly in the Nile. For because if you think about it, if the Bantu expansion is taking place at the latest, or if you go with the extreme date of 10,000 years, which they no longer go with 10,000, but just to be just for the sake of being hypothetical, even if you go with 10,000 years, you still have to account for the E1B1A being present for an additional 10,000 years in the East,
Yeah,
because that's where it came from. If you study the E lineage, that's where it was before. And
yeah,
so when I asked AI, I was like, because like the thing that I'm understanding now about at least
yeah,
ChatGPT will tell you that there is information in terms of genetic studies that's not available to the general public, but they can still see behind those walls on the internet. And so,
I advise people, and I'm saying this as as an AI engineer, right?
mhm,
That I advise people to use Manus more than ChatGPT. It
okay,
costs a little bit more, but it does deeper research. Like it goes
wow,
deep into journals. I used it to go deep and give me the exact words from the journals of the Russian explorers in Alaska. What did they see? Right. And it gave it
yeah,
to me like clear. Do you know what I'm saying? With the
yeah,
words. And I even went into German journals. I said, I don't speak German, but I need you to go into the German journals that they were using, because they were speaking in German and writing in German, right? And it went deep into those journals, and it concluded this thing. And it's kind of odd, but I wanted to get I don't know if you saw this post I made before, right? Using Manus, right? That the very word, right? And this is odd, but the very word for coarse pubic hair is the same word that they use to describe Africans' hair, the same word that they use to describe the native Alaskan hair, right? That's the same word. That's the word they use in German, right?
oh
To make
wow.
it very clear. And I made it very clear. And you know what? People still put the laughing emoji on it and all that. I'm like, man, y'all don't know how to read. I said, you don't know what I just proved? You know what is proven here is clear. It's clear at this point. Those people in Alaska had afros. That's what their hair looked like, and they were in the cold. Yes, that's what they looked like, though.
But like, when it comes to comprehension, that the lack of comprehension is indoctrination too.
Yeah,
Like the ability to think in abstract thought, you
yeah,
know what I mean? And because like when you go into school, right? When you sit for the SATs or ACTs,
yeah,
you remember the test and the standardized
yeah,
testing
yeah, yeah,
included, your ability to read a sentence and then guess what the sentence is talking about,
yeah,
or
yeah,
fill in a blank.
yeah,
So what it is basically reading comprehension. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And I'm not saying that people in general can't comprehend reading. That's not what I'm saying.
yeah,
But they could comprehend reading in a standard way based on indoctrination. But
yeah,
when you start giving them stuff like anything that's not like really like written verbatim in a history book in plain sight, it's like that function in the brain just
and
like
it's
ceases.
sad. It's sad because it's like the world is controlled by puppeteers.
Yeah.
Because like I don't think people understand how history is written. And but from their perspective, they think that there's like this really smart white guy that travels the world and just looks everywhere and archives it and then comes and puts it and synthesizes it, and now it's history. And that's how, no, the way that history of a people is known is by going to those people and asking them. So what they're not understanding when they say, oh, you think you're an Indian because your grandmother said so, damn right, that's how history works. Like, what? How do you think history? How do you think stuff gets recorded into books? They go to villages, towns, and they go to the really old people and they ask them, "Who are you? Who are you people? What does this mean? Why do you do this?" And they archive it, and that is how history is spread. Not the other way around. You don't go as an outsider and then ask the people who they are and then decide if you believe them or not. And
Right.
that's actually what the Europeans, whether the colonialists or the ones now, or white people in general, in that world have been doing. And they don't see a problem with it because white supremacy, it's so ingrained in the way people think that they don't realize that they're being disrespectful, with what they're saying, where they're
They
just
think
like, you know,
they think like, and it's all a part of the indoctrination because the heavy work has already been done. Like,
yeah,
just because even though people still get hung from time to time, that's still a thing.
yeah, yeah.
But you know how it was back during during the
Jim
Jim Crow
Crow,
era.
yeah.
You know what I mean? They were making a determined effort to instill fear, in certain regions
It
of the
was an
South.
attempt at genocide, actually. They actually thought it was going to work, like maybe
Yeah.
in their little town. There's a book called Negroes with Guns. My father gave me this book. And in the book, it mentions when in this certain town in North Carolina where they were shooting back, and I put a post about it where they were actually fighting back the Klan, the police,
Mm-hmm.
US, not even US Marshals, but like other state people that were working toward committing genocide. It wasn't just simply to the fear, definitely it was a campaign of terrorism, but the goal was really like hopes of like wiping us all out, right?
Yeah.
Because they wanted it to leave no trace. And what seems to have happened, that seems to have happened in Australia. They said
Yeah.
that there were way more tribes than what we see. But for some reason, and this is where it gets back to culture and people being different, right? I remember there was, I think, Solomon Islands or one of those Pacific Islander black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was a video and they were asking, and they were just real docile, kind people. And they say, the white people took our land and they didn't even ask for it. Right. Basically saying if they had asked, we would have given it to them. Like it was kind of weird. Right.
Yeah.
Now, with black Americans, I don't know what it is about black Americans, but our civil rights movement, everything that happened before them was fierce compared to everywhere else in the world. With all the people, even in Africa, where their land had been taken, colonialism, South Africa, it wasn't until we stood up for South Africa in America that everybody was like, yeah, that is pretty messed up that they're under apartheid,
Yeah.
because it was something that made us uncomfortable. In reality,
Mm-hmm.
it was the United States, it was us here. And so I tend to wonder, like, is that something? Because I always try to look at the differences of things, of ways that I can prove. I mean, we have the genetic arguments and the historical arguments, but what other things can prove that Black Americans are not Africans?
Mm-hmm.
Colonized by the same people in the
Mm-hmm.
Caribbean,
Mm-hmm.
in America,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Mm-hmm.
the outcome is way different. If we were just simply African exports, we would act the same. And what do I mean by that? I mean, Africans allow white people to do a lot of stuff to them that even the most impoverished Black American would never allow. Never, never. The type of disrespect that I saw, the type of exploitation that they allow, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Jamaica, when Europeans tried to turn Jamaica into a safe haven for pedophiles to come and mess with the children, they got ran out.
Mm-hmm.
They got ran out.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that the same thing would happen in any Black neighborhood in America, right? Nobody would allow that sort of thing, supplying children like I've seen happen in Africa, where they are supplying the children to the Europeans when they come because they want money.
Mm-hmm.
No dignity, no integrity, no care for their own people. That type of like wickedness that I've seen in Africa before that I've never seen of us before. Never,
Wow.
like wicked. I mean, like stuff where you'll hear about horrible cases of human trafficking, horrible stuff. I'm not saying that Black American people do not do bad things sometimes. I'm not saying that. But it's just the nature of the crimes are different. I find
Yeah.
them to be very bizarre. the
Yeah.
nature, the sense of justice, the sense. And this is what one woman, I think she calls herself Chief Warhorse. She
Yeah.
said that, she said, we were fine until we started helping the slaves. When we saw that that's oppression, what you're doing to the slaves, what you're doing to those people. And she said that the Indian nations got involved because they said that's not right. Right. But it ended up causing us problems in the long run. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
then later on to have people that are actually related to because the African slaves, we can't deny they were here, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that many though. It wasn't that many.
Right.
It wasn't in rather it wasn't enough. It wasn't
Right.
enough for them to build this population. Right.
No.
But those people, like once she said, once we stepped in, that's when the radar kind of came because it's like now messing with their money, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Yeah, it's real interesting. When I try to look at the different angles though, like not just the basic, yeah, definitely the slave ships didn't bring enough people, right?
No.
But what else? What else? Like I do see differences in appearances,
Mm-hmm.
consistent. I'm somebody who's married to an African, right? Who
Mm-hmm.
told me like I see you people to have your own unique appearance, just like everybody else in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else in Africa, you people in America have your own appearances, right? That are unique. You're melanated, you're dark, you're that, but you have your own appearances, right? You have your
Absolutely.
own, right? Yeah.
I think for just like you were talking about too, you know the difference in the gumption to not tolerate certain things in our population is because like it's just like you mentioned for Africans, they have been uprooted like you just mentioned like early in the podcast. You were talking about how a lot of them themselves recognize the fact that they migrated from other continents, countries into Africa. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like I think
It's
it's a
it's
different.
it's that's more from like when you get deep into the tribes, when you get
Okay.
deep into their knowledge, their history. The
Yeah.
modern ones in general uh don't say anything that Europeans wouldn't like for them to say in general. Right, I'll say that they don't like to say so. They'll be like, we're Africans and we are from, and this is our home." But when you really like grill them about it, like, okay, then where were you before that? Okay, so you
Right.
guys say that you were herders, but these types of cows only exist in this part of Africa. How did they get here? You start questioning them. And in Africa, they don't really like us for that because we ask a lot of questions like, what does that mean? Well, why? Well, why would they do that? And why is that? And why did this tribe want to fight against that? Oh, we don't like to talk about these things. It's like, well, why not? Right? You want to ask me about everything. How did I get to America? What's it like there? All that. Well, I want to know about you too. I want to know. I want to know these things. And when you grill them, you find out that that there was a video online where an African admitted that. He said, we don't really know. We don't know. We don't know what we said. We try to
And
act like
that's what I'm getting
they
at.
have no idea.
If you don't know your origin, even though they tried to lie to us and erase our complete origin, it's still in our soul. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
they didn't successfully kill us off completely. So, like it's still in our soul.
Yeah.
We still have spiritual and genetic memory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That you can't erase unless you erase the entire population in mass. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But if you have some survivors, and I think that's what they felt in their soul, like even though these people don't know exactly what happened to their ancestors, they still have spiritual recollection. You
But
know what I'm saying?
I mean, imagine leaving so many breadcrumbs. Imagine at the same time, but like the indoctrination is so cool, and I have to say touche to them because they were successfully able to convince everybody of a story. Like there's nobody that's living right now that's able to say like, like we can say for sure like all the politicians are in on this. Like they believe the lie too. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like everybody believes it. You have
yeah,
to uncover it in a different way to where you can't just say, "Oh, they know it. They're just keeping it." Let's tie him up and ask him. And, okay, fine. The original people were black. They don't know. They believe the indoctrination as well, right? And I remember even when I first started to learn about Africans that came to the Americas, settled before Columbus, right? Maybe among the indigenous people or around them at least, right?
hmm
And I would mention that to people, and they were like, "How are Africans supposed to go there?" And it's like, wow, people have a lot of learning to do about who were the advanced people in the world I even have a theory that in ancient times that the Africans and the Black Americans would interact with one another, right? I think it was just white people that weren't a part of the party, right? And I think that's what bugs them the most, is that this whole world was functioning without them, right? And that they kind of crept on a lot of empires. The Roman Empire, there's history about their empire being usurped by white people, and people don't really know when it happened. They don't really understand how it happened, but
I
it happened.
believe I believe that back to the Nile region
Yeah,
thing. What I was gonna say is that AI, even ChatGPT, when I'm using ChatGPT,
yeah,
right? I asked ChatGPT, I said, is the E1B1A that originated out of the Nile region the same as the Bantu? Even I'm like at the point of the, even if you go by 10,000 years, I
yeah.
said that population that was all the way out in the West in its original state, I said, was it genetically identical to, the Nile Valley's E1B1A? And it said, hell to the no.
Mm,
You see what I'm saying? And so what I'm
yeah.
saying is that they think we're making this stuff up when we say that the Maya started the Kemetic civilization, but
Mm.
their hieroglyphs are in their temples.
And they're identical. I've always wondered about that connection. Like, why are they identical?
Yeah, their hieroglyphs are in there. There were these two white guys. I can't remember their names, but it's somewhere in my notes in ChatGPT because somehow I was able to figure out who they were because they really didn't say it in the video. They might have mentioned one person's first name, and then I ran it through ChatGPT. I was like, his first name is this, that, and the other, and I was like, this is a photo of the glyph that I saw on the video. I took a screenshot. And so I shared it with ChatGPT. And the first time I shared it with him, he was like, ChatGPT was like, that's got to be a hoax because that's identical Mayan glyphs.
Mm,
It was like, that can't be in Egypt. I'm like,
mm,
well, they saying that it is. And so the second time I brought it back up, I guess the information had been updated. You know what I'm saying, in ChatGPT, because so the second time it was willing to accept it. And then it tried
mm.
to say it never said that it didn't accept it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
swear,
That was
man.
why. See, I used to use chat, a
Yeah,
lot until it
yeah,
started acting like in the early days, it was reckless. In the early days, you could get it to admit all sorts of stuff. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And then it would just be like, okay, fine. I admit I was wrong. Yes, they were black. Everything is clear. And anybody that denies it has cognitive dissonance. It would say exactly what, not that I was telling it to say it, but it was like, how can anybody be in denial with these facts? But now it's a little bit more politically correct, and it's like, well, we can't jump to conclusions, and this it's like, man, I use Manus for that reason. You know what I mean? But yeah, I get it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So that bloodline originally was the same bloodline. I
yeah,
think over time, the Black Moors start creeping into the region along with other migrations that came in.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? But
yeah,
that
yeah.
Nile Valley region seems to have been our original bloodline that came from the Americas.
Let me ask this, right? Because I've been wondering about this,
Mm-hmm.
and like I don't know how I go down rabbit holes, and I'm just like, interesting. The Grand Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
And what is it about? Like, people have been saying lately that the Grand Canyon, actually you can travel through it and is blocked off because of where it can take you.
Yo,
People have been
I,
talking about how it takes you to Africa, and it takes you to, that would just like solve a huge puzzle. Do you know, in my head? Like, oh, okay, I get
I
it.
think the truth is so mind blowing, man, and I think that the truth is controlled. You remember you remember the movie Man in Black, right?
Yeah,
I think you know how Hollywood is really truth in plain sight,
yeah,
but
yeah,
hidden at the same time.
yeah. Mhm.
I think the Man in Black is inspired by the Smithsonian Institution, man.
Probably.
Because the Smithsonian was the institute that erased the dude I can't Kincaid. I don't know
Mm,
if you heard of the guy Kincaid. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Kincaid. And he
mm,
was a Smithsonian employee. He was a Smithsonian archaeologist. And
okay.
so for whatever reason, he was traversing through the Grand Canyon's valley, and he noticed an opening in it that looked peculiar. because he's a trained archaeologist, so he has a trained eye to notice things that that are out of place. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
And so he noticed something unusual in the Grand Canyon, and so he went to investigate. And so he kept going deeper and deeper into the Grand Canyon. He ended up going, I think, to his testimony. I think he went 20 feet deep into the Great Grand Canyon in terms of depth into the ground.
Yeah.
And so when he got down there, he found like pretty much like damn near a whole city down there.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Full of tombs, full of hieroglyphs. And in them tombs, you know what was in them tombs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because Tamaria, I'm pretty sure you heard the terminology.
I've
It's here
heard
in
it
America.
before. I haven't gone too deep into it, but yeah, I've heard it. Yeah.
Right. Tamaria is here in America, and it seems like it was an extension of the Mayan, civilization. You
Okay.
see what I'm saying? And so it seems like the Mayas started that interaction between America and the Nile Valley region, because the older Egypt is in the Grand Canyon. You know what I mean? Matter of fact, King Tut was found in Kentucky first. And it seems
Mm.
like the Smithsonian shifted all of the archaeological evidence over to Egypt.
Mm.
Over there, when I say Egypt, the new Egypt that's over in Africa.
Yeah.
Not to say that like the Egypt didn't have any real significance. It did.
No,
I'm
but
just saying.
the thing is, right? I always go back to the old language and like the words that are actually being used. And in both Hebrew and in Arabic, the word for Egypt, it just means tall buildings. So
Mhm.
it doesn't necessarily like necessitate that it needs to be in that one place. Do you understand
Right,
what I'm saying? It
right,
could be like a whole, like somebody was talking about it and calling it a frequency. I don't know what that meant, that, but whatever it was, it just means tall buildings. It just means
right,
tall buildings. And so, like, where were a lot of tall buildings? It seems like there was a lot of tall buildings here,
yeah,
a lot of tall structures and whatnot,
right,
as well as there. But when we say there, there's not really that many in modern Egypt, to be completely honest. You have the Pyramid of Giza, these things like that, but there's more pyramids in Sudan. Right.
yeah,
And if what if and then what if there is another place, because now we get into some of like the old books that like, and there's one narration that I'm looking for that allegedly an early expedition ended up in a place that seems like Canada, right? An early expedition from the then Muslim empire, right?
hmm
And
hmm
they end up in a place that seems like Canada, and this
hmm
is the kicker, they hunt a creature that seems like Bigfoot.
hmm
Okay, like it's some strange stuff like that. And this is a really old narration from hundreds of years ago, but I
hmm
didn't really get to read it really deeply and see what commentators said about it and see what the hell does that mean, right? But
hmm
one thing I'll say is that I don't think America has been, I used to teach American history, and whenever something is really boring to me, it's because I find it to be inauthentic. But I didn't know that I was finding it inauthentic because I was a teacher of history and I'm struggling to make the lessons fuller. But there's
hmm
not much to talk about. Like, you know what I mean? Like when history is real, it's easy to sit and talk about it and this story. And then this war happened.
Absolutely,
This is how these people were
absolutely.
feeling. It's so manufactured. It's not even funny. When you talk about Benjamin Franklin, the Revolutionary War, it's so manufactured that it doesn't really make sense. The
I
whole
mean,
story.
like subconsciously, when we were kids, man, and they were telling us these indoctrinated history stories, man, you could just imagine that subconsciously we're thinking like, man, we're not even a part of this story for real. We are shadow in the background. It's much different.
And
You're in
one
the
thing,
forefront.
there was a girl in my class in third grade. This is the first time I ever saw something like that. And in the last, actually. Her name was Dakota.
hmm
And she would never stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. She was a blonde hair and blue-eyed girl, right? And we were like, what's up with that? And she's like, I'm a Native American, so I don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, right? And like, it was so weird watching her do that because like it wasn't a secret that like like that my mother was from Alabama, that she was born in 1960 under during Jim Crow. It wasn't fully gone, right? It wasn't a
Mhm.
secret that she said they had to avoid certain water fountains. Right? It wasn't a secret that we're reading about in high school about the Great Migration, and I'm like, that's describing me. That's describing my mother. You know, like so they went to California, they went to Ohio, they went to Chicago from the southeast because they were ran out of their homeland. But we're
Mhm.
looking at it like, oh, they were just sharecroppers down south, you know, because they used to be slaves. It wasn't good for them, so they had to move away, right? And
Mhm.
then I have this white girl in my class talking about she doesn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. For what? You guys got land reservations, respect for the fact that you're not going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. If I said I'm not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance because I don't think the United States did right by black people, I would have been in the office. I would have been
Yeah.
in the office. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so I always thought it didn't sit right with me at the time because I'm like, what oppression did you face that you can sit and say, I'm not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance? You see?
Right.
Right?
Right.
It's like
And
those things
you
would
know,
just be bizarre growing up watching.
they're allowed to, like, you know, and they might be offended by me saying this, but they've been allowed to be a placeholder, you know, for that title, even though Europeans made it very clear there were multiple ethnicities here. But the thing is that, you know, the what we call, you know, Siberian derived Native Americans, they
Yeah.
just may have been like the last arrivals.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They might have just been that. And like I said, and connecting it with, you know, with Kennewick, man, I think I pronounced his name right. But his genome did not represent you know, the full genome of Native Americans. You know, what he represented really, you know, if you're really looking at the studies closely, is he represented like an anomaly. You know what I'm
Mm,
saying? Like it made the story and the suspicion a lot worse if you really paying attention to what they actually reported. You know what I
yeah.
mean? They're talking about populations. He getting this gene flow from populations that existed 40,000 years ago. And mind you, the most basal form of the most frequent paternal haplogroup in Native Americans, the most basal form is over there in Europe.
Really?
Yeah, I just found that out like a couple of days ago because when I was doing the Kennewick, you know, presentation, it made me go read deeper into the populations that the study was talking about because, you know, I want to be thorough with the presentation, and it just
Yeah.
made me have to read deeper because I'm like, they say that these populations are basically, they got African structure in their genome. So
Mm,
I'm like, if they in Europe, like how do they got African? Then they said 40,000 years ago. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
even though we know that's not really African, what they're
Yeah.
calling African is basically Negro genomes.
Yeah. 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 No,
You
we
know what
know
I'm
that. Yeah.
saying? When you read between the lines. And
Yeah.
so when they said 40,000 years ago that these populations existed, and then, you know, when the ice age hit, they consolidate. And I believe that that ice age crap, I believe that that might be a placeholder for invading groups that were not melanated.
That makes sense. When is
Because
the
they
ice age supposed to
consolidated
have?
and they
When was
put
that
down
supposed to have
south.
happened?
Yeah, go ahead.
When was that supposed to have happened? The ice age.
You said when it was supposed to happen?
Yeah. What
Well,
era? Like,
allegedly, it was several of them. It's just that some of them were worse than others.
okay. What's the most recent one?
I think that one was like 25,000 years ago.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 25,000 years ago. And allegedly, that's when these black populations in Europe began to move further down south to warmer regions, right? And so, but the thing is that when they start moving down south, you start getting these Anatolians moving in to Europe. You start getting I think it's called the steppe population that moved in as well.
What did Anatolians look like at that time?
Anatolians are basically the backbone for the modern Mediterranean look.
Okay,
Because
so
you
they did have that appearance at that time, that kind of Mediterranean look. Were they ever black at any period? The Anatolians?
no,
Never. Okay.
never. And see
Okay.
that's the peculiar thing. Like they really did like just come out of nowhere and start replacing, you know, black Europeans. Matter of fact, you heard of Cheddar Man, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Cheddar Man was part of the Mesolithic European um, uh, era, right? And that was the era when, you know, the Anatolians really became to be, you know, their numbers really start picking up.
Yeah.
And so that's who Cheddar Man's population got eventually replaced by. So
Hmm.
Europeans actually, this is how we know that modern Europeans derive in part from Cheddar Man's population group, just not directly. They have more of the Anatolian and the steppe population,
Yeah.
which were farmers, incoming farmers, according to the history that's written now. Now I
Yeah.
believe that it was an invasion. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah.
And so, but anyway, they eventually got replaced. But as they were getting replaced, they start moving in different directions. You know, some move further down south, some move back into the Levant, and so forth and so on. And so, you know, to tie this is what I'm saying. It's the same bloodline, and the reason why it keeps becoming the same bloodline is because, and the reason why people don't believe us is because they were being invaded and they were moving around so much. It gives the appearance that it had to be impossible for it to all be connected.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, when they're thinking about it, they're like, how could everybody be invaded at the same time and be
Mm.
forced to reconsolidate? Like, they reconsolidated, and it just so happens that the rulership, some of the rulership that was in Britain, where else were they? They were in Britain, Ireland, Italy, France. Just like Thomas Jefferson said,
Yeah.
that was the last remnant of that same bloodline that was related to our ancestors here in America. Like,
Mm.
the Highlanders were being kicked out of Ireland. They were called Irish Highlanders.
Um,
The more pale population were called the Lowlanders.
so
And
the
so the
Highlanders
Lowlanders,
were these the melanated Irish, the Highlanders?
yes, they
Okay.
were the melanated exile Highlanders, and they put up a last ditch revolt, and they had leverage because their bloodline was still sitting on the throne.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? But they would not conform to the white European ways of doing things. That's why they went up into the hills anyway.
Oh.
They're like, we want to keep our tribal traditions. We don't want to, you know, to assimilate into your cities. We don't want nothing to do with that. Leave us alone. But
Mm.
you know how,
Are these the ones that end up exiled to the Caribbean?
yes.
Let me ask you though, is it okay? So I had asked Manis this because I was trying to get to the bottom of the R haplogroup that many West Indians have, and
Yes.
whether or not does that come from a recent European, right, or does that come from an ancient one, like some ancient European haplogroup like R? Because I know R is the one that usually throws people off there, like that's like European full and full, right? What do you know about that?
So like you know, like since you know, like the Anatolians and the other farmer groups that represented the pale races in Europe,
Yeah,
um, they mixed with you know, black people.
yeah,
So like black people were the original carriers of the R's.
okay,
And the R actually originated again in that same region. You see what I'm saying? Like, everything came out of the Southeast Asia and Oceania. Everything was
okay,
coming from this direction.
yeah,
You see what I'm saying? And so the
yeah.
R, you know, originated like in the Siberian region, but at that time they still were not pale.
Of course, of course. So okay, so that makes a bit better sense because like my specific like haplogroup,
Mm-hmm,
they say that it's the one that is in it's a lot in Ireland, right?
mm-hmm,
But allegedly it comes from a guy named King Niall. Now, King Niall, I did a little bit of research and like my assumption was like, okay, the High Kings of Ireland, whatever, you know, that they had a lot of kids, obviously, and those children carried on, you know, the lineage, whatever.
mm-hmm.
But there's nothing that describes him as a white person. And I'm not sure if any of those kings, because what they have is the lineage of that guy recorded back to like the 3rd century, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if at that time, 2nd, 3rd century, were those people still black there at that time, or were they had the invasion? You know,
I mean, according to Thomas Jefferson, they were still black until 1755.
in Ireland.
Yeah,
And
he
I
was
like
living
why
in
like
ancient Ireland.
it's crazy because that information is so well like hidden. That's not something they want anybody to know. You know what I mean?
No,
Like
that man said what he said, man. He said Ireland was
1755.
black as hell.
That's crazy. That's
Yes,
crazy.
man. He said Ireland. He said I can't remember if he mentioned Scotland. He said Ireland, Germany, France. He said they were all like. He said they were all
Oh,
black people.
are you talking about the Benjamin Franklin thing?
Yeah,
Where he
you remember
said,
his observation of whatever it's called. It's called observation something.
yeah, something where you're saying there's not many white people left in the world. And he was like, there's
Yeah.
just the Germans are black, the French. And I'm like, what is he talking about? Like who like when? But you know the thing about it is what I learned actually that
Mm-hmm.
the languages that we now are considering these dominant European language like French and German and English, these were all pidgin languages of the peasants. And
Yes.
they made them the language of the people to make the people ignorant, and they made
Yes.
it like they added eloquence to it and whatnot, but they're not eloquent languages. They're just trash languages that were spoken by the peasants in those areas where it's a mixture of a little bit of Latin, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Right. But what does that do? They were educated in the languages of the world. They knew Hebrew, they knew Arabic, they knew these languages that would allow them to be smart. Right. But they did not allow, and those are the languages that are pushed on us. And it gives us this weird notion, I think, that white French people are numerous. They're not, you know, white Germans, they're not numerous. They don't have that many of them. There's not enough of them. In fact, they rely on African countries to take care of their old people, right? Because
Mm.
the country can't run if the young people are stuck taking care of the old people all the time. Right. So that's why they allow for the African refugees and the South Asian, whoever refugees to come and do the jobs that they can't do. It's not just that they don't want to do. They don't have big enough populations. You know, that's what they're
Wow.
so concerned with population control in every other place in the world except there. Like you never hear about them saying, "Oh, there's too many Swedish people in the world," because they know that there's not that many of them. You know, and you notice one thing about white people is you know how they talk about Afrocentric, right? Every white person is Eurocentric, where they compliment every European on everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black people, like we're all at odds with one another. We're just, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In Africa, they're all at odds with one another. Nobody loves each other. In
Mm-hmm.
America, they got us all divided. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I really liked this effort where people are going back to tribe, to where it's like, that's pretty cool. You know, like I'm not really even concerned with what state you're from, except that you said that you have origins in the Southeast, which would be more like we're connected, maybe even on a tribal basis, not necessarily on state or zip code or other divisive means that they've put there so that people don't really just sit down and realize, you know, we could overthrow the United States if we organized, right? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Because that's what the fear was in the 1970s, that there was going to be an effort to overthrow the government led by Black Americans. That was
Mm-hmm.
the fear. And it's an honest fear because the people were at war with them back in the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
That's normal in a country where things get rekindled. People learn about things. They get mad. They feel like things are not fair. And I mean, it is what it is. That's just history. That's just history.
I'm gonna throw the disclaimer in there just in case they try to say we're trying to incite something. We're
No,
not
no, 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 no,
literally
no.
telling
I,
people to
I just read history. I just read a lot of history, and it's like we
yeah.
read about Southeast Asia, what started the Vietnam War, Cambodia, all these places. It's like like the fear is not there anymore because as a people, as you've seen in the group and the other groups, Black Americans are their own worst enemy. Like there's just as many Black American people in the laughing comments when there's
Yes.
you know, with the laughing emojis as there
Yes.
are Native and white people, whoever, right? It's a fragmented group of Black Americans that understand how to read history and understand exactly what is going on. You know, everything that some of the people mention in the group, they'll say, right? Like you guys don't know any indigenous language. Yeah, that's a feature of conquered people all over the world. That's what happens. That's the idea. You
But
don't
they
want them
can't
to.
answer the question back as to why we don't speak, why how come we don't speak West African languages?
And that's the thing about it, right? They'll say, oh, because they want us to believe they split up the different tribes and had all these, it was so organized that they all these different tribes that don't know the same language as each other, where in reality a lot of some of those languages overlap anyways. So
Yeah.
they would have found a common way and common words, and they would have been in the dialect until now. We would still be using those words until now, those African words. We don't have any African words. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, you know, even in the Caribbean, right? The national dish of Jamaica is this dish, saltfish and ackee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the ackee, we've always been told, came from West Africa. The slaves brought it. So I met a guy from Ghana one time, and I showed him a picture of an ackee, and I said, "Do you have this in your country?" And he looks at it, he's like, wants to not make me feel bad, or I don't know, I wasn't gonna feel bad anyways.
Yeah.
But he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we have those. It's very spicy." The ackee doesn't have a flavor to it at all. So what do you mean it's very spicy? Like, you know? And so it's indigenous to the Caribbean, right? It's a food from the Caribbean. It grows on the islands, the trees there. It's not something from West Africa. Even if it might be able to grow there, it's not from them. It's not from their culture. It's not from anything that has anything to do with them. It's
They
from
be trying so
Jamaica.
hard, don't they, bro?
Yeah, and it's like you didn't have to do that. If you didn't grow up eating it, just say I didn't grow up eating it. I don't know what that is. Right. But you
Yeah.
want to believe, oh yeah, we it's come from my country. Everything that you guys do comes from my country. Like, come on, it's ridiculous.
I think they, I think they'll take it and run with it as long as, the power structure allows them to do it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, yeah,
And I mean, we
because
we should always be optimistic that it's not going to be this way forever. And the voice of change comes from just regular people, right? That in the Solomon Islands and the Pacific Islands for the longest time, the theory was these are Tanzanians. And the reason they have naturally blonde hair is because Dutch sailors were here and slept with the women. And that was the belief that everybody had to go with, that these are Africans with blonde hair because they're part Dutch. Until eventually people were not taking that anymore. They said, no, we're not Dutch and we're not African. This is what we've always looked like. Right.
yes,
And they had to say, oh, well, they have blonde hair for a different reason than Europeans. Europeans that have blonde hair, it's coming from some other gene. Their blonde hair is indigenous to their island where they're from. Right. And they said that's just where they're, and so they named the subcontinent Melanesia. Okay, these are Melanesians, like,
hmm hmm
okay, so what are we then, right? Just why can't Americans just be Americans? Why can't we just be what we are?
that
Like,
population that I was talking about that put that gene flow in the Kennewick man.
yeah.
Like AI was like, because I got around to asking him like, so how would they have looked? He was like, of course they were deeply melanated. He was like, they had like curly to light hair, and he was like, they had blue and green eyes with Negro faces. He was like,
Mhm.
something that you won't see ever again.
And that's the thing that I try to tell people when I talk about certain ancient populations. I'm like, the description is a black man, very much. That's what we call him. But it's like I never seen one that looks like that specifically.
Yeah,
When you talk about the ancient like Persians and ancient people, I'm like, I don't know if we'll see a person that looks like that again. Like
you won't.
about 9 feet tall with black skin. Like I've never seen a 9 foot tall guy at all. But they existed. We absolutely have to,
Because
acknowledge that. But
what
yeah.
happened was, and like this was my whole point in getting into, like genetic diversity and doing like the YouTube, demonstration on it is because genetic diversity, which in that article that I read, that first article that I read, it had, Black Americans as the most diverse population, in America, which
Mm,
should be to no surprise.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But our genome, like being diverse, is reflective of what your ancestors were in population capacity. Because essentially what's going on is that you develop the population large enough to develop and maintain and to be old enough to have this type of diversity. And we're only representing the remnant. This is not, we're not even like
Yeah,
the ancestor
yeah,
representation.
yeah,
We're their children.
yeah.
And we're their children after they got murdered, slaughtered, been through all types of famines and anything that you
Do
can
do you
imagine.
believe? Do you believe real quick
Mhm,
when it comes to professional athletes,
mhm,
specifically the black ones, right?
mhm.
Do you think that they have a gene that may have existed with like an entire tribe where like everybody was like 7 feet tall, 6'7", and like robust? But since they divided us around the country and whatnot, and
Mhm.
it's just something that is like a recessive gene at this point. You know what I mean? Like Shaq is way bigger than his mother and father, but
Mhm.
perhaps he represents a people that were, I don't know, conquered, split up, you know what I mean, to where, because what they told us is that they created those people during slavery. They said, oh yeah, we used to breed the strong women with the strong men, and so they would produce strong slaves, right? And
Mhm.
that is the theory that they are sticking with for people like Michael Jordan, people like, Kevin Garnett. But like, when I read some of the descriptions of some of the indigenous people, they
Mhm.
gave them a hard time. Like they were really strong. You know what I mean? They were like of a different, I don't know, they were different, is what I'll say.
I mean, the anatomical remains in these mounds are like the way that they describe them is like they describe them as like Supermen.
The
You know
ones
what I
who
mean?
built
Like,
the mounds.
yeah, the remains in the mounds, they're described as Negroid types, you know what I'm saying? But at the same time, their bone anatomy and structure is like it's not like modern humans, and it's not because they're primitive, like they were like some type of black caveman or something like that. That's
They're
not
like
what they were
cream of the
saying.
crop type people, like very proportionate and strong, is what you're saying.
They said their chest was huge. They said that their bone structure was like extremely dense, like nothing like modern humans today. They were like the structure. They was like they almost couldn't describe how dense their bones were,
Mm.
and they had
I
already
like to,
described giants in the land when they got here.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like according to Aztec tradition, their land was that city, which is Mexico City today, was built and inhabited prior to by black giants.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like Chief Tuscaloosa, according to the description of the Europeans, he was at least like 10 feet tall.
Okay.
You know what I mean? He was a gigantic, and he was proportioned. It wasn't like he was 10 foot tall and he was lanky about to fall over or something like that. No,
Mm.
he was 10 feet and robust.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So like, yeah, these skeletons, like these remains that's being found in these mounds, they were originally reported and it's archived in the Smithsonian. You know what I'm
Interesting.
saying? And so
I'd like to read that. I really would. I'm not saying, because I do believe it exists. I just don't. I never knew where to start looking. Like who said what and where is it? What language is it in? Is it in English all the
you
time?
could put in a request to the Smithsonian. I'm in the process of doing it now. They emailed me back and they were like, because like the second email, they were like, be more specific of what you're looking for. Because they was like, is it not available in our catalog? And it ain't. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I wrote back in the third time with Pacific archaeologists and the
yeah.
names of their reports, and they did say that they have some of them. But
Okay.
I told them I want to come in and I want to look at it because I don't want to pay a whole bunch of money for what I don't want. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
I said I want to come in and I want to look at the catalogs. You know what I mean? I want, well, not the catalogs, but their archival records and their field notes is what you would call it, because a lot of the field notes contain information that their archives didn't. So I
Mm,
told them I want the field notes and I want the archives. And I said I want to come look at it before I pay for it. Because what I'm gonna
yeah.
do is I'm gonna nitpick pages out and I'm gonna get exactly where they said Negro this and Negro that. And I'm gonna
Perfect.
take
Yeah, that's
that,
exactly what you gotta do. Because
you
they
know.
like everything's not in those archives. I got the APIs for it when I built my website to
Yeah,
be able to just kind of search records and keywords and all that stuff. And they have a lot, there's a lot of information. I mean, a lot of information that supports everything that we're saying. But
yeah,
there's some
absolutely.
things that I know haven't been archived, and I feel like it was done deliberately. There's
Yes.
certain things but it's there though. You have to just know how to get it.
And see, the reason why you can't just go by archives is because even AI, pointed out the fact that, some of the archaeologists reported in their first report that they were Negro like. and then they later changed the archive to primitive.
Oh, so they
And
were using the
AI,
words primitive and Negro energy. So primitive is kind of like it's a synonym for Negro in old
exactly.
journals. I'm gonna make a note of that because I wouldn't have done that before. I wouldn't have thought about that. Okay, so primitive is okay,
And see,
perfect,
the reason why AI was able to catch it is because they published it before they changed it. See what I'm
interesting.
saying? They came out in public and said,
I tend to wonder. You know about the discovery of Pompeii, and then they hid it from the world, and then they like presented it to the world after like some time. And their argument was that it was so disgusting what was happening in the pictures and the statues
mm-hmm,
and whatnot that they had to just hide it from the world,
mm-hmm,
right? But
mm-hmm,
like I don't know, like I went through those pictures just because I wanted to know,
mm-hmm.
right? And there's a lot of melanated people in Pompeii that seem to be kind of like running things. I mean, it was a city of orgies, but the people behind it seem to have been black. You know what I mean? It seems like that is the case. Now, I wonder if that was the real reason for why they hit it. You know what I mean? Because like
That's
what you're
definitely
saying
the
just kind
reason. Hell yeah, that's why they
of,
did it. You know, like we kind of got to look at it now like that because we starting to get the real history, not just here in Americas, but what was going on simultaneously around the world. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying? Like, you know, I personally don't believe in coincidences. You know what I'm saying? Especially a large coincidence like that. Because when you look at it, you got the Black Moors who had just been exiled from Iberia.
yeah,
At the same time, white Europeans start, um, going to battle with the remaining Black indigenous populations throughout Europe at the same time, even in
yeah,
Russia. You know what I'm saying? And then they're over in Oceania at the same time. You mentioned something about we were talking about Japan in the Far East. The
yeah.
Joman population are D carriers, and they're the only population group that I can think of that built earth mounds just like the population in America. It's like this spitting image.
You want to know something, right? That I was talking to somebody about in Japan. Now, I don't know if you saw that there's a show on Hulu called Shogun,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's real. Did you? I don't know if you saw it or saw
I'm
a
not
commercial.
familiar with it. I'm
Oh,
just following you,
okay,
but
okay.
yeah,
And anyways, it's about basically European presence in Japan, like the 1600s, something like that, 17,
yeah,
something like that, 15,
yeah,
1600, something like that, right?
yeah.
And so, my father's into history and all that. I was talking to him, and he's like, if those Portuguese sailors on that show are not black, they're not telling the truth about history. And I'm like, what? So, and again, I've always known about the Portuguese blacks, and I assume they were just Moors, but historically, maybe they weren't, but that's another story, right?
Right.
Those, so what happened was when they got to Japan, they were just out there as sailors trading with the people, earning whatever happened was they started to hook up with the local Japanese women, right? And there was one island that was really just half black and half Japanese people, right? We'll say that,
Yeah.
right? At that time.
Mm-hmm.
The then emperor did not like that. He thought that it was tainting their society or what they were trying to establish of Japaneseness, and he went and massacred everybody there with his
Yes.
army, murdered everybody, all the Portuguese blacks, the women, the children,
Mm-hmm.
everybody, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
didn't want, because they were going to leave a huge dent on their society. And it seems like Japan, I find them weird. I find them very weird, like as a nation until this day. They're one of the strongholds of white supremacy in East Asia to
Mm-hmm.
this day,
Mm-hmm.
Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to wonder if everything that we've been told about World War II and the Emperor and all that is even true. You know what I mean? About the way that they sided up with the United States after they nearly committed genocide on them is weird. You know what I mean? To
I
this
see
day,
what you're
that
saying. I
they
see what
never
you're
built
saying.
up but they're one country that doesn't really need visas to come to America. They can get visas on arrival. They're considered a first world country, like, but they're extremely anti-black there. They're so anti-black that when white people were voting Obama in, they were in disgust that it was happening. All
You
the
know
way on
what?
Japan.
When I was not to cut you off, but on that same note, when I was living in Japan, and the only reason why I was living in Japan, for the 2 years I was living there is because I was in the military at the time.
Okay.
I
You were in
was in the, I was,
Okinawa?
hmm?
You were in Okinawa?
I was Navy, so I was in Yokosuka.
You okay? Yeah. My
Yeah.
parents are military as well. My father's retired for many years, but they're out in Okinawa right now. Twice,
Was he
second,
Marine?
second. No. Air Force.
Air Force. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Air Force had a presence down in Okinawa?
Yep. With
They
the
had to.
Marines.
They had
Yep.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So but yeah, so I was into boxing for a little while, right? And so I actually started, like getting boxing training in Japan. I don't know what made me think of this, but I was all over Japan with a duffel bag on my shoulder trying to look for a boxing gym.
Yeah.
And so I eventually found a home, and the um, the guy that ran the gym was an older guy. He had a son that was a very good boxer. He still boxes now. His name is Ricky Naito, and
Yeah.
his father's last name is Naito as well.
Okay.
And so his father was a boxer as well. That was the one who ran the gym. In his day,
Uh-huh.
he was pretty good.
Yeah.
He struggled with alcohol, and that came to be his demise.
Yeah.
But the reason why he got into alcohol is because he was, a mixed black man with Japanese. He was half Japanese and half black.
Okay.
But the thing about it that I never asked, because I don't, I try not to dig into people's business,
Yeah.
especially if
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was a hurtful history. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I'm a foreigner anyway. I'm a
Yeah.
guest in their house, so
Exactly.
I ain't really trying to pry at them like that. But
Exactly.
now that we're talking about it, I never asked him, was it by way of the American military, the blackness? I just assumed it. But now that you said what you said, could he have been some,
Well,
black?
well, one thing that my father told me, see, my father, he's old, right? He was out in Japan the first time in the early 80s,
Yeah.
right? And he was saying like them as I wasn't born yet, but like them as like a family, my older siblings and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
they were kind of like exotic to the people. The people saw them to be like exotic. I don't know if it was like that when you were there, but at that time in the early, it's like this, like kind of whatever. And he said even the people that are given like a lot of like TV, publicity and whatnot, that image that they want to push of Japanese people is not always even accurate. Even down in Okinawa, you have people that have very different features, very different appearances and whatnot. A lot of the blackness of Japan was erased though over time through like
Yeah.
murder and subjugation. And the Japanese were very good at that, even during World War II when they forced like Filipino women into prostitution and they forced Chinese women. You know what I mean? Like they know how to erase a people, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
for whatever reason. So the Ainu people, I think they were the one remaining woolly haired Japanese
Yeah.
people that existed. They weren't very dark in their complexion, but there's pictures of them. I don't know if they exist anymore. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Well,
So
Japan
yeah,
apparently they still have a black population, but once again, they reconsolidated up in the hills.
interesting.
Yeah, they're still there, and they are very dark. They might not reach the same level of hue that we can here. You know what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah. But still, though,
Like,
yeah, it's noticed.
yeah, but they're brown. They're noticeably melanated. Like
Okay,
it's no, they're a Negro type. Woolly hair.
interesting,
Yeah, and
interesting.
it's not, no disrespect to the Africans, but it's not the African woolly hair. It's they have froze.
Yeah. No,
You know what I'm saying?
absolutely.
It's
It's
the
interesting
Afro.
when you talk about. It's interesting when you talk about that specific phenomena of the hair,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you do have people in Africa that they have very similar hair to Black Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, though, it's ending up in the places where we allegedly didn't come from. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, like the Sahel region of West Africa, like in the desert,
Yeah.
Mauritania, into those places. When you look at the people, you're like, okay, that's familiar to me. That looks like my family,
Yeah.
but then there's some people that are more from the coasts of West Africa where it's like they sometimes look like us and sometimes more times than not. I'm
Mm-hmm.
finding like And it's actually funny. There was a when I lived in Saudi Arabia in my dormitory at the university. There was one West African living there. In fact, there was two. Right, one was a Hausa by this is like North Nigerian. The other
Mhm.
one was from the Ivory Coast. And so
Mhm.
the guy that was the Hausa, he was from the UK. So me and him would talk, more than anything. And he said it's so interesting watching the metamorphosis, right? He said from the West African, the way the guy from Ivory Coast looks to you. Like, and I just would find that so bizarre, but that's the belief is that the reason you guys don't look alike is because a lot of African tribes were all mixing together. And then also there's the European mix with that, right? That's where Black American appearance comes from. And that doesn't add up. I don't
That
accept
don't
that.
add up
It doesn't
whatsoever.
add up at all. It
No.
doesn't add up at all. When you look at certain characteristics and features that are consistent, that we might even notice. We don't even notice them, right? Some people in other countries have pointed out the eyebrows of Black Americans, right? They
Mhm.
said, I always know a Black American by their eyebrows. And I'm like, really? I never thought about that. Whereas some other groups of melanated people might be known for their height.
Mhm.
Some other groups might be known for, even in East Africa, some are known for their straight hair. They're
Mhm.
melanated, black skinned people, but this is what they're known for, right?
Mhm.
That just shows that we're the blueprint.
Yeah.
We're simply the blueprint. That's all. That's all we're trying to talk about. And I think some people are just simply jealous about that. They don't like that they're not the blueprint. And I know this, right? I remember from school, kids were a bit open. There was we were watching a video. I'll never forget this back in like seventh grade.
Mhm.
And a kid, I think the commentator was saying that he said Africa is the origin of all man. Right now, I think what his intent was blackness, right? We'll leave it at that, right?
Yeah.
So there was a white kid in the class, and he said, I thought that Europe was the origin, right? And I thought that was weird because I never even heard a scientist say that. Like nobody says that Europe is the origin of man, right? But what he
Right.
wanted to feel was that whiteness is the origin. So when white people went to Africa, they got dark because of the sun, but you can't get back to that original blackness once it's gone in reality. You know what I mean? Like no
Yeah.
matter how hard some people try, and there's been people who've tried that saw the importance of melanin. They're like, you know what? I'm gonna have dark children, right? They try to, and it doesn't work. Because darkness is you can't get back to that once it's gone. Once you get
Right.
away from that like pure origin, it just dilutes, and then it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, from a genetic standpoint, that like, to, not to beat a dead horse, but
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
depigmentation alleles literally it inhibit the the genes that produce deep U melanin.
yeah,
Period. You know what I'm saying? That's a scientific fact. You know what I
yeah,
mean? But
yeah.
in this day and age, since we're in the age of Eurocentrism, or at least the end of it out, because I think it's coming to an end.
I
I
think so
can't
too.
say,
I think so too. I think so too. And it's actually kind of scaring me because I don't know what's next.
yeah,
What's
yeah.
next?
It's another chapter coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because don't nothing happen for a reason. There is a spiritual element to the physical realm. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
And it just seems like it's time now. Everybody, like, we were waking up in bits and pieces before. Like you said, our elders would tell us stuff from time to time. Your
yeah,
elder told you that they were Choctaw.
yeah,
My elders told me the same thing, not necessarily Choctaw. I don't
yeah.
remember
No,
them specifically saying like a tribe.
no, I
But they
understand. I
definitely
understand.
said, they were Indian. At the time, though, we were busy getting indoctrinated. I didn't really know what that meant. I'm thinking
Exactly.
like maybe we mixed with the Siberians, but that's not
That's
what it
but
meant.
you see, that's exactly what I've always thought it meant, right? And I
Yeah,
was like, so what? And that was my whole thing. And I would always hear fragmented. Some people were just a bit more bold about it,
yeah,
right? That's what I found. Some of my Black American, comrades and whatnot were a bit more bold about it, and and a bit more bold about not accepting Africa. And I thought it
right.
was bizarre because I'm like, the research is out. Like, why is it that you guys are so hard headed? That's the way I looked at it at the time.
Well,
But
some people retain their tribal connection a lot later in the
yeah,
history than others.
yeah,
Like for us in the Southeast, like for those who walked the Trail of Tears,
yeah,
they stood a better chance of retaining the memory of the tribal history.
yeah,
for those who stayed in the Southeast, we stood a lesser chance because we kind of had to hide the identity.
Yeah.
We kind of had to assimilate and kind of like, be in the shadows about that.
And
You
you
know what
know
I
what?
mean?
If I didn't know like the wickedness that that is white supremacy, just saying it, bluntly,
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't make sense to me how these things. And I think that's the part that a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their mind around.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you would have
Hey
to
man, we
accept
still learning exactly how diabolical they were.
it was like, and yeah, exactly. But like the question would be like, in my lifetime, have I ever seen somebody from a certain culture lie to get somebody locked up? Yes. Have I ever seen them just like within the military world? I grew up in as a military brat, right? Have I ever seen people lie to get rank because they want to get close to somebody, tell lies on people from a certain culture overwhelmingly, and usually even from a military perspective, when certain people from my culture hang around a certain culture, they start acting different and start doing little underhanded things like that, little conniving things like that. Can I believe that during Jim Crow and before then, that they could just make stuff up and strip people of their identity because they're
Yes,
too dark? Yes. Yes, I do. I
absolutely.
do believe that the dude in Virginia was like, basically, I don't like that all the Indians look like you. I don't like that they look
Walter
like
Plecker. Walter
Walter
was the
Plecker. That's
person.
what. Yeah, Walter Plecker. It's like I
Yeah,
don't like that. He said the Indian race doesn't exist anymore because all the ones that are saying that are Indian are black. Well, maybe that just means the Indians were black. Did that ever occur to you? Like the fact that his words are respected until this day is crazy.
yeah,
Everything that he ever said needs to be undone immediately. They
yes,
were taking down Confederate statues and stuff in Virginia. They need to just repeal that and put people back to what they were before he did that. You know,
exactly.
just put like if you
But
want to
if
do
they
right,
do, if they
it
do
sets a
do that,
precedent for the rest of the country.
right, and like reparations is due because they paid everybody else.
But you know what? This is what I'm wondering about. Like, I don't know if you know, out in California, allegedly people got reparations there, right? Or no?
You know what? I
Allegedly.
didn't keep up with it, so I don't know. I'm not really abreast with that, so I don't know. You might be right about that, but I
I
didn't
was
keep up.
wondering on the basis of what though. See, because I was wondering if it was because the people in California know that they're indigenous to California. They didn't want any smoke. So they just kind of gave in to whatever they were asking. And like it just kind of went over quietly. You know what I mean? I noticed I said,
And
why
I
isn't
think
everybody?
they just called it slave related.
Yeah, no, no, but what slaves were in California?
No, nobody. I think they
That's what I'm
just
saying.
called
So
it.
why did those people get reparations? Like, is it any black people just moved to California? Because California, I don't know them to have had slaves there. You had the gold rush. You
They
had
didn't
people
have
move
any
out there.
slaves. So if they getting reparations, I think what was going on was the government is recognizing indigenous people. And listen, if this airs and people are listening, I'm not saying I know this for sure, but it was no slavery going on in California. So if any black people got reparations, they might have tried to attach it to slavery, but
Yeah.
it had to be about indigenous ancestry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's got to
But I
be.
mean, but you see, I don't know if you what I saw this on TikTok. A woman, older woman, was mentioning that there's a place out in Kansas that
Mhm.
has like land deeds that are basically owed to families, but we don't really know what our names are. Do you know what I mean? That are connecting us to those records. But they kept the records to say, like, oh, this is fair. They just got to claim them. Right. There's like huge, like acres of lands that are owned
That old
or owed
okey
to.
doke stuff. They know we having a hard time tracing our ancestry to claim it.
Yeah.
They're not gonna help us, but they like whenever y'all
You're,
figure it out, it'll be here.
but you see, you're not even allowed. You're not even allowed to look at those records until you get your other records together. Once you
Exactly.
So it's like they
It's
know you
insane.
can't get in. Like, sad.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I wanted to mention too is one of the most specific things that I had in terms of Indian, indigenous ancestry in my family is on my father's side.
Mm,
With his grandfather, which would be my great grandfather. And so speaking of, having, false claims put on you and stuff like that. So like my great uncle is Clarence Norris. He wrote a book called the Last Scottsboro Boys.
mm,
The incident took place in Alabama, and they got into an altercation, a physical altercation with a group of white boys. They were young too at the time. They were all teenagers. I think my uncle was 13. And so they got into a physical altercation with the white boys. They tried to, the white boys tried to push them around because it's Alabama, and they're like, we don't want you on the train, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
But the shit was moving. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
But it was moving. You know what I'm saying? And so they're like, we ain't going nowhere. And so they fought it out. They got the best of the white boys. The white guys, the young white guys, they were upset. So they put a white girl up to saying that they raped her.
Mm.
And so my uncle ends up going to jail at 13, 14 years of age, and he spends 18 years in jail before he gets, until the charges get, dropped or whatever. But the main thing I was going to say is that in that book, he's telling about his experience in dealing with his own father. And he said, I don't know much about my father, but he was Indian. And, he was born into slavery.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And he said he was copper colored with 2 long braided pigtails that hung down to his waistline.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? So it fit the description that you see in the 1828 Webster Dictionary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's not ancestry. That's back in like the 1500s. This is my great grandfather.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's my grandfather's. That's my father's grandfather.
Yeah.
Now he was pretty old when he married, my great grandmother. Like he was considerably much older than my great grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So obviously he was alive during slavery. So he had to have been born prior to 1865. Ancestry has him, I believe, at like, I want to say 1845 for his birthday.
Interesting. See, that's deep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
That branch is primarily from Georgia. It's all Georgia. As far as where I'm getting stuck at right now.
That phenomena of Indian slaves in Georgia. If I'm not mistaken, I have to look it up where he's from exactly, but
Meriwether. Meriwether is where he settled down with my great grandmother.
Okay.
That's where he got married. Meriwether County.
No. See, I was thinking about was Adam Clayton Powell. Okay, yeah. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. and Sr. Adam Clayton Powell Sr. And they're like nearly white. Do you know what I mean? They can pass for white, as a family. Yeah. But he was talking about his mother, the father of Adam Clayton Powell, the civil rights dude. He was saying my mother was mostly just Indian. She was just an Indian woman, but like they were supposed to be black with a lot more white. Do you know what I mean? But I think like people are not realizing that the black and the Indian are the same thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it just seems to be the same thing. They're just kind of like, and like to the point where it got so ambiguous, even if there were Africans among them. Like my mother's birth certificate in 1960, it says other for race, which I thought was weird. I'm like, why doesn't it just say black or African American? Or why does it say other? Like, what do you mean other? She's very noticeably black like everybody else in Selma. She looks like everybody else in Selma, right? That's what they look like. Yeah. But they didn't have it wasn't clear. I asked AI. It was saying because it wasn't clear. They didn't know. It was not that clear. The Indians and the people that even they thought were Africans all kind of looked the same. They were all kind of black people with woolly hair, Negroid phenotype.
And even in the instances where they're calling people Negro and sometimes calling them African, it doesn't mean they were actually born in Africa.
Yeah, of course.
What it really means is like if you really follow the history of slavery, it started with indigenous people primarily.
Yeah.
And so if you think about it, like indigenous people made up the majority of slaves throughout history. And so if you think about it, if you are constantly kidnapping their children at young ages, and you kidnapping and they become slaves for a lifetime, their children, over time, and especially if you're intimidating them in terms of them keeping their Indian customs and ways, and there's punishments for them doing so, and you done already kidnapped them at a young age, it's
Yeah.
gonna get lost over time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean?
And
Like
that
so,
seems to be
like,
what happened.
and so you can literally go from a cultural Indian to a cultural Negro over generations.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
Oh
so
yeah.
instead of wearing your garments, you wearing like American stuff. You wearing overalls and
Yeah. 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 And vice
button
versa.
up shirts.
And vice versa. There seems to have been Africans that ran away, and when they ran away from the plantations, whether they were with Indians or not, and it seems that it was mainly Indians, like what you said, that were running away from Georgia into the territories in Florida and attacking the Europeans from Florida. Do you see what I mean?
Mhm.
So like, but I tend to believe that even if there were like Africans, they ran away to the indigenous people and adopted their ways of just being Indian, right? But I don't think it was that many of them though. It doesn't seem to have been like so many, like I think they said that there was like a ship of 400 or something like that,
Mhm.
or some other small number that arrived in the United States that they can't. And every other one that they're saying is going to the Caribbean, that woman online pointed out that there were no ships leaving England because of the plague. And the king, he had put out an edict that no ship should leave that specific year, that they're saying they had all these slave ships going from England to Africa, and then Africa to the Caribbean, and then slaves were populating the United States and other places. That's not what that it wasn't possible, because the
Mhm.
bubonic plague was crazy to where it was like anybody that came in contact with someone was going to infect them, and it was like 1 out of every 3 people had it. And there's no story of the plague reaching West Africa ever, right? So when did those ships go from England to Africa and then bring those people to the Caribbean? It's not possible. She said it's possible that those ships were leaving New England and bringing American Indian slaves to the Caribbean. It was leaving New England and going to the Caribbean and coming back and getting more and bringing, because this seems to have been, not seems, we're more populous here than the Caribbean. And a lot
Mhm.
of those slaves did end up in the Caribbean, which everybody knows is another proof, because where are those Siberian looking people in the West Indies? We've never seen them before.
Never.
They're nowhere to be found. We don't know anyone that looks anything like that.
Nope.
You know what I mean? So
Nope. Nope. And it's crazy because they still try to claim it anyway. Like we not smart enough to put two and two together.
they claim that they were the slaves in the Caribbean, the people on the reservations. I'd like to hear them say that, because that's funny.
Now, let me pump my brakes. Now, most of them won't take it that far, but they
But
still
they
try to
have to,
say,
though, because the history is there. This is documented that most of the slaves were coming from America. They were defeating these tribes of indigenous so-called primitive nations, and they were trading them around the United States and in the Caribbean. So it should be very easy to go to like Trinidad, for example, and oh look, it's the people that look like the Seminoles they drew in the pictures. There they are, right? Where are they? We don't see them. We don't see them in the Caribbean. They're nowhere to be found.
nah,
So
nowhere to be found, and they can't say that they have any slave ancestry because those people weren't them. It's just that simple.
yeah.
They were enslaving like when they came at first contact with the same populations that they enslaved. Immediately when they saw them, they called them Negroes. Now
Oh yeah.
they try to sway it up and try to say, no, that's just the caste system, which it was, but at the
Yeah.
same time, they were describing them phenotypically sometimes.
Did you see um The Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio?
I think I did. I can't remember exactly how that went. You had to
There was
jog
one.
my memory on that.
Okay, well, there's one part where it blew my mind, because the whole movie, in my not my opinion, I don't see a single black person in the whole movie, right? But the wording, they tried to keep it very accurate, I guess, to what they were saying in the journals and whatnot. And they get to a point where they're afraid of this enemy Indian tribe, and the man refers to them as tree niggers. He was like, "There's tree niggers all over here." And I'm like, well, why is he using the N-word? Like, there's no black people, like why? But I did a little bit more research, and I learned that there was forest nigger, there was prairie nigger, all these terms, and the N-word is used so frequently to describe American Indians that I find it bizarre that these people think that they're talking about them. Like, how can you, oh, that was just the word they used for everybody. No, they didn't. What are you talking about? When did they use that for everybody?
Right.
You know,
And
no. And there was a woman, she brought it up. There was another, it was called that, like Nigger Creek or something. And it was this place out in like Montana. And it's like the most bizarre parts of the country where we were indigenous to this whole place. Do you know? It's not even just because they say you guys just talk about the Southeast. I don't think it was just the Southeast. I think it was everywhere. Seems to
yeah.
have been everywhere. You know,
Hmm.
California, all these places.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
definitely. Definitely.
but try to watch the movie again for the part where they're like in this. They're worried about people shooting them from trees. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah, that's peculiar,
and they
man. I'm gonna
use that
definitely check
specific
that
word.
back out. Yeah, I'm gonna check that back out, man, for sure.
Yeah,
I never noticed that before. But now that we're getting into this knowledge, things are starting to see things differently now.
and that's what I mean. And I kind of made a mental note of that when I saw that movie, right, so many years ago, that I
Hmm.
went back to it, and I'm like, I knew that it wasn't just a coincidence to where, oh, the white people were so racist back then, they called everybody the N-word. No, they didn't.
Nah.
They were smarter than that. Give them a little
Yeah.
bit more credit. They're not, because it wouldn't make sense. They don't have TV back then. They don't always have access to pictures. So now they're back using a derogatory term that is usually only used for black people, right?
And it wasn't just about a caste system because with that description, with the phenotypical description, it came with so much animosity.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So you knew for a fact it was some history behind.
I read the descriptions that were surrounding, like, no direct, like, they are black, they are this, but like other things, because again, to the early European, they were a bit more well read, a bit more
Mhm.
articulate. So
Yeah.
they're gonna write about other things. Like, no, I want to tell you, I'm not, there's more to them than simply they are dark. That's what people want to see. They want to see descriptions that's just black and woolly hair. No, there was more to them. They put things like they're a very nimble people, right? You know how people talk about people in the States, oh, you're from the States, you can climb over fences and you can hop the fence and do this. They said these are people, they're very nimble and with their hands, and like, they're flexible, and they're just mentioning things that people say now, and they say they're good athletes and they're good at jumping, and they're those same things. They're saying the same things in the descriptions. And then these
Mhm.
people come later and say that they're talking about those people. We don't see you guys going and representing the states in the Olympics ever. And if you guys were good at sports, then you'd be there. Don't say it's
Mhm.
because you're on reservations or anything like that. You guys just are not athletes. Sorry.
Nah.
Like, come
And
on,
they try
stop.
to cosplay the descriptions of being robust. The mound remains in these reports said that they had robust facial structures.
Okay.
You know what I mean? They had huge jaw structure, dense
Mm,
jaw structure, protruding jaws. You know what I'm saying? Like, um, I forgot the word for protruding jaws,
yeah.
but it's basically what gives us this appearance here,
Yeah.
where our faces are slightly projecting like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's another Negro feature that when you
Yeah.
when you look at a Negro from a mile away, you see that.
Yeah.
It's a very noticeable marker.
Yes.
You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? So that's the way that they were that's the way that they were described in the earth mounds.
Yeah.
And jaw density is another deeply hereditary marker within, our population group.
The
So
other
when
thing that I
mhm,
wanted to mention about the description was the gaze of the American Indian, right? The Europeans found the gaze to be like exotic and intimidating, and at the same time something they notice that when they talk to you, they study you and they look at you very deeply and they listen to every word, like literally.
yeah.
And during Jim Crow, one of the things that was illegal was for a black man to look at a white man in the face. And they would always say it was, oh, because they wanted to put them in their place and make them less than them. But I think it actually scares them to this day. I think it's something that it puts
It's
fear in them.
spiritual.
It's not so much a fear like, oh, they're monsters, but fear like they're in awe almost,
Yeah.
like to where it's just like. And I've seen a Tunisian, and they have their European ancestry through slavery and whatnot out in Saudi Arabia. There
Hmm.
was a black man there from not Pottstown, from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He's about 6'3",
Mm-hmm.
and he actually was on football scholarship. He's a football guy, but he wasn't, doing sports anymore. He was out there teaching, and he was playing basketball that day. He just had on his regular clothes, shorts, t-shirt, and the Tunisian guy just stopped and stared at him, and he said in Arabic, he said, his body is amazing, and he said, that's like, I've never seen anything like that. That shoulder with that skinny kind of like waist, kind of like that triangle shape.
Yeah.
He had a real athletic build. He played football in college. He was just playing basketball regular that day. And I'm like, that's a regular looking guy. What is it that you're so in awe about? But I thought about it like there's not anybody from your society that looks like that.
Yeah.
And dare I say in Africa, that would be a very weird build too. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
there was a guy, I'm gonna tell you. So there was a guy that wanted to go see about a girl in Africa. He wanted to marry her, right? He was
Mm-hmm.
from DC. And this dude is real like jacked, And he's not just jacked, but he's tall. He's like maybe 6'4", 6'5". Now, to be jacked is normal in Africa. There's some dudes that are like that, but they're usually about like 5'8", max. It's not normal. It's not strange to be tall, but usually tall guys are not jacked like that. So when he went out there, they said they didn't even believe he was a real human. That's how they were like, was that guy real? Like, what the heck? Like, we've never seen anybody tall like that, and his body is big, So there's something about the Black American type that is weird. There's something strange about it compared to other societies in the world that people can't quite comprehend. And, to say that it is merely a mixture of Europeans and random African ethnicities is
Yeah,
not, no.
that's trash, man.
That's
That's
that's not
trash.
working.
Like, I've
No.
never accepted that, and I think what they're doing in terms of the DNA, and I'm a I'm gonna have to wrap it up in
Yeah,
a
me
minute.
too. Me too. I was looking at the time. I'm like, man, I can go on for a long time this subject, but
We'll do it
I get
again
it.
though, man. We gonna do another one, man. We might have to do this like every couple months or something, man,
Yeah,
because both
yeah,
of
yeah,
us got a lot to say. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
So this
absolutely.
can't be the last one. But what I was gonna say is because I think that the Kennewick man population that entered from Europe
Yeah,
and picked up the Eurasian, type, because what they were saying as well about Kennewick man was that he also had Australo-Melanesian, ancestry as
interesting,
well,
interesting.
as well as Eurasian ancestry as well. And so I think what happened was when that population entered, we mixed with them as well.
Okay.
So I think that the what they're calling European is not really European in a contemporary sense, but they're trying to make it look like that. I think that it's Eurasian because
That
they
probably
will
is the
admit,
case.
like AI will admit that we carry about 5% of that European that they're reporting on the average
Yeah,
for Black people, which we're not
interesting.
seeing in our genealogy. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
But it's like 5% of that is already chalked up to Eurasian ancestry that predates contemporary Europeans. It's ancestral to them.
Mm.
So
And that needs to be spoken on more.
yeah,
Because they there's some people, they show off their DNA test, and they talk about the percentage European. They don't really understand what it's saying. They think that, oh yeah, we've interacted with them, so we must be descending from them as well.
yeah,
But that I realize that that's a little bit harder than people want to make it out to be. Everybody wants to be like, yeah, you guys are our children, basically.
yeah,
That's what they're saying. That's what they're saying, basically, that we are their children.
right.
And yeah, you
No, we are
wish,
ancestors.
you wish.
Yeah, we're your ancestors. We carry genomes that existed before you existed. Like literally, I'm
Mm,
not making it up, man. Part of our ancestry is what you would consider to be Eurasian.
yeah, yeah, no
You know what I'm
facts. Yeah,
saying? And that Eurasian ancestry is ancestral to white,
yeah,
contemporary Europeans.
yes,
Just is.
yeah,
So
no,
it gets kind of smoothed in because the consumer DNA they don't separate the two. You know what I mean?
so
They're so
they
close.
put it all together.
Yeah,
What I
they
want
can
to
tell.
know, I want to see if I can get the proper code to implement that into my DNA thing so that it splits. Because right now, what it does for me, it puts like 16% European. But I didn't know that within that European is a category that is really old. So I'd like to know like how much of that 16% is from the really, if not all of it. That would be,
I think
kind
it
of
is
interesting.
most of it, if not all. I
Yeah.
think they're trying to, they don't want to lie completely about it. So they're like consolidating two stories. They know that
Mm,
we've had interaction with Eurasian populations in terms of our ancestry being from Eurasia partly. And that's
yeah.
probably because populations like Kennewick Man brought that into the United States. And then those tribes intermix with that population because I see ancient America like this. I feel like ancient America was in its most ancient time a biblical population, meaning that
Mm,
it was much more diverse in ethnicity than what it was when Europeans showed up during
okay.
those times. By that time, I think that the biblical population had been broken, you know what I'm saying?
Mm,
And people scattered. And
yeah.
so by the time that the contemporary Europeans got here, they saw that. And then those people were in a tribal state by then.
Okay.
It was no longer the biblical time. It was, you
It
know,
was no longer the time of like advancement with buildings and structures and
right.
whatnot, but it was still there though. It was still
Yes, it
there.
was there. Yes, it
and
was
and there
there.
was a lot more than, because a lot of it was destroyed, wasn't it? A lot of the, and this is another, I could go on for hours, I know, but like definitely that's another subject about the ancient America and the ruins and other things that were found by the Europeans when they got here that they didn't build.
They
you
said
know
that they
So
pulled. I mean, they literally said that they pulled up on towns. They didn't say,
you
villages.
gotta
They said
DM me
towns.
that stuff. I want to see the writings when they say what they saw when they got here of structure, right? We always
Yeah.
talk about like what they saw of people. What did they see in terms of buildings and whatnot? Yeah.
They said that the Aztecs had aqueducts, plumbing.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
What
that
about
was
within
like
the United States though? What about here? Like in terms of like, I know the mounds, they, were ancient ruins and whatnot, but I've heard things about like the palaces and whatnot that were here that the
now. See,
Europeans.
when it comes to the United States, the reason why I gotta kind of like use Central America because for whatever reason, when it comes to the United States, and I guess because United States is the central
Yeah.
locate, it's like the epicenter. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? At least it was the epicenter that they felt like it was the epicenter when they came. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because the original Maya, they were invaded. That's what their records show. They
Yeah.
were invaded and they scattered and reconsolidated to the southeast.
Oh, so that's where the Maya connection keeps coming up.
Yeah, they
Because I didn't
they
understand why people kept mentioning the Mayans, and I'm like, okay, I get it, but that makes better sense now.
yeah, they
So
came
they
up
ended.
here
Okay,
with
so they
people that that
originate.
that look like them because the invaders were people that didn't look like them. And this is before European arrival, is what I'm
Yeah, no,
saying.
no, 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 no. I get that. I get that
Yeah,
part. Yeah.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
ones who didn't look like them are the more Siberian type people, or no?
Nope. That I think they were a slightly different population group. I think that the Siberian derived population intermixed with that that later Eurasian group. I think that the invaders were the Anatolian type, Middle Eastern type looking people. And the
Inter-
reason why, I don't think this is like a coincidence because Egypt was being invaded at the same time too by Eurasian, lighter, Anatolian looking type invaders. If you
mm,
look at the Mayan, depictions, they're grabbing these, Anatolian looking Asian people
mm.
by their hair with
Yeah,
the
yeah, I've seen that.
same
Yeah,
mallet.
yeah.
It's the same depiction in Egypt almost at the same time.
And that's around what year? Give the timeline for that.
Oh man, don't make me lie about it, man. Let me see. When they had that,
That had to have been like in the BC era, right?
yes, it was definitely
Okay,
BC. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah.
yeah,
So they
yeah.
at the same time were. I got to do more research. See, the world. I used to think I knew maps. I don't know maps anymore. Like I'm confused. I'm gonna be honest, because like I used to think that I knew where places were, but I'm like, maybe there's something they're hiding, but I can't find where they're hiding it and how. You
Yeah,
know,
man, they
like
did a good job of hiding a lot of stuff, man. It's not our fault.
yeah,
They did a
yeah,
good job of hiding it, man. But yeah, man, yeah, I think what we'll have to do, man, is let's write down some stuff, man,
yeah, yeah,
periodically. I don't think we could wait 2 months, man. I think we'll have to get back on it,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
like in another 2 weeks, man, because we
yeah,
both got a
yeah.
lot to say, man.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll have my notes together because I didn't
Yeah,
know exactly the directions. I knew you wanted to talk a little bit Africa and whatnot, and my interactions with those people.
yeah,
But there's some other things that even has been like my brain can't wrap around. Like I want to get my hands on, which I can't find, like because I know that a lot of the Choctaw and other languages were not written down, but I just kind of want to go through the language and just kind of look through it with some because when you talk about the biblical era and whatnot, it's safe to assume that some type of Hebrew or Semitic language was present in the Americas in a way, whether it was something that the native or the indigenous American languages are derived from. I'm usually able to tell, but I wasn't able to find any of the like original things, and a lot of it is coming from the reservations where we know that language was made up. You know, it's something that is like even more watered down than what they found the American Indians speaking. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's not the original whatever they were speaking. As much as they, are boastful about those languages from the reservations, there's evidence that they were made. So yeah,
yeah,
definitely. But anyhow, I don't want to hold you too much longer. I know that I can like subjects they get brought up, and this is real interesting to me because I just, to be honest, just learned about it as much as I do within the past few months. It's not something I've been researching for years. It's something that I just came on. It's very interesting, very
nah, bro.
interesting.
We definitely we gonna do this often, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We
yeah,
gonna team up, man, and we gonna because I know both of us are gonna learn more after we get off this podcast,
yeah,
even in 2 weeks, and we'll have more to say even by then.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I'm gonna look into this Kennewick man stuff even more because
I'm gonna do it.
I'm dipping into his ancestry now. I'm back in Europe now,
Yeah.
so I'm studying that and I'm tying it together. This has something to do. That population has something to do with West Africa as well.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Because that population start putting their gene flow into West Africa well before the Bantu expansion.
Okay.
So yeah, it's connected like
Well, that
that.
would answer a lot of questions that I have about Africa, because the story is not, it's not what people make it out to be. It's not adding up. You know what I mean? It doesn't add up. The way they got it now
Yeah,
is several populations just sprouted out of the ground. They just
yeah,
came from nowhere. All throughout West Africa, it's like, when did they get there? It just seems like, oh yeah. When you talk to some of the indigenous people, they'll like if real indigenous, they'll tell you certain tribes like Ashanti are from Europe. I forgot. I don't know if I mentioned. There were some people that I asked the person. I said, "Well, who's indigenous?" You're saying Ashanti. They said a lot of the tribes that you guys know about are Europeans. They said they came from Europe and
oh,
settled, and that was actually interesting. I'm surprised I didn't write that down, but look into that. Look into what the griots say from certain tribes about their origin, and then there's certain. There was one dude, I gotta look it up. He was telling me that there's only like this group, and this group that are truly indigenous to West Africa. They said everybody else is an invader. They said everybody's an invader. And I was like, what are they talking about? And they were almost like they were saying anybody that grows a beard in West Africa is not from there. They said that was not something that we knew. And there's a lot of people there with beards. So it's like, what if all of them are invaders? That's interesting, you
and
know?
so they think we just making this stuff up,
No, they say it themselves in Africa sometimes. They say it
right?
themselves.
Yeah,
They said these
and
people are, yeah,
that's the reason why. That's the reason why I wanted you to come on, and speak your truth, man, because you lived
yeah,
it. You know what I mean? I've lived abroad one time, and I was just in Japan. I
yeah,
can't say that I've ever lived in Africa or
yeah.
Arabia, nothing like that. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
figured
It's
I'd bring
it's a real
somebody.
interesting
Mhm.
experience. I'll say that. It's real interesting. And the way that people look at race in America versus how it is there. I would argue, I'll mention this before I go, that in Africa, between two groups of melanated people in Kenya, the same country, they are just no, they are more different than a black American and a white American. In
Mhm.
Africa, they're way more different. I mean, like the language, the culture, the customs, the smell, the food. I mean, they are so different. It's like they're two different races, more so than how America is, because we have more in common because we all live, watch the same TV, watch the same
Right,
sports, you know what I mean?
right,
Hobbies are similar, not
right.
them. But from the outside looking in, you see a lot of people. Like I saw somebody on the group post a meme of somebody with a plate in their mouth saying these are the ancestors of black Americans. That's an East African. That's an East. Who said that we descend from East Africans? You don't even know Africa. You don't realize they're so diverse within one vicinity, one county, let alone the whole continent. They are very, very, very vastly different from one another, right? Which
Mhm.
for me, it just helps me add them to the spectrum of black people throughout the world and say we are all very diverse and different in our own ways, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. The
But
real
anyway,
history of melanated people is hidden, man. You
yeah.
know what I mean? And hopefully we can get more, African populations to come out and speak out. You know what I mean? To help us,
The
unveil
ones that
this
I
stuff.
think will be the most honest are the ones that within Africa are accused of trying to separate themselves. Because it's like we don't need anything from y'all, and we don't need anything from y'all. We don't want to give you anything, right? That's
Mhm.
how Americans are. In general, we don't need anything from Africa. We don't ask them for anything. We don't ask them to contribute to our culture, our way of thinking, or come and sit on a panel and explain anything. We don't
Mhm.
care, right? Those people that are like that are more likely to acknowledge our autonomy. But the other ones that want to feel special, because there are some like that, right? And some people not feel special by connecting themselves to us, but feel special by putting us down, by saying, "Oh, you guys just think you're nothing but a slave. You guys are just descendants." That's what they want to do. To where it's
Mhm.
like, well, there's a bit deeper history that we know about. If you don't know about it, then sit down and learn.
Yeah.
Some of them are willing to.
Yeah.
Anyhow, my brother, I don't want to hold you too much longer, right? I got to get going myself. I looked at the clock; it's almost one.
Hey,
But
yeah,
I
man. Let's
appreciate
get
this
some sleep.
discussion
We
because,
did our thing, though, man. I think we
right,
did our
right.
thing. This is a good one.
All right,
I'll be in touch, though, man, about the next
absolutely.
one.
Text me whenever, anything. I'm free. I'll answer. If you come up with something, some research you came across, send it my way. Some of the stuff we discussed, I'll read more on it. Because there's some things I really don't know. But I do want to learn.
Yeah, we done learned a lot from each other, man. You done gave me a lot of knowledge, man, and we'll keep bouncing this off each other, man. That's the point of doing this. And yeah, so yeah, I'll be in touch, and let's get some sleep,
All right,
and we'll think about the next time we'll do it, which will be soon.
soon. Yep, yep.
Yes,
All right,
sir.
let me know.
All right, be
All
blessed, man.
right,
Have a good one.
have a good one.
All right.